Chapter 561. Sister Wu, if King missed you so much, Wang Lu said as he kicked. This kick was fast and ruthless, combined with the power of primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi. It was no less than the full power attack of a middle-grade king pill cultivator. Even if it was a peak king pill cultivator, under a hurry, only half of them could steadily withstand it. However, Wang Lu believed that with Sister Wu's strength, it was absolutely easy for her to withstand this ending descendant's kick with her eyes closed. Therefore, the key question was whether he could take the opportunity to escape. When it came to escape, Wang Lu was not good at it. His speed was mediocre, and he was not proficient in concealment spell. Relying on the countershock force alone to escape from the 9 regions #1 king pill was tantamount to a fantasy. Therefore, after Wang Lu kicked, he quickly sent a message through his primordial spirit to disturb the enemy. Little Luli is having a difficult labor in the house. I'll go find hot water, you protect her. In general, when a normal person receives such a message, they would inevitably fall into a great shock, so that they would not be able to make an effective response in a short period of time. Moreover, Wang Lu was deeply aware of Sister Wu's deep bottom line, so when his primordial spirit transmitted the message, he also attached a considerable impact force. If it was against other people, this was simply a two-pronged deadly killing move. However, Wang Lu knew that even if his attack power doubled, he might not be able to hurt her. He could only hope that she would be unable to react in a hurry, leaving him a little opportunity. As a result, in the next moment, Wang Lu saw the power of the 9 regions #1 king pill. The primordial spirit attack was like a stone sinking into the sea, silent, as if the target of the attack was a stone rather than a living person. The ending descendant's kick was blocked by an invisible wall of air. The wall of air with absolute defensive power coldly scattered Wang Lu's primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi. Therefore, the bones of the 5 toes were instantly broken under the impact. Of course, Wang Lu also borrowed the countershock force, but before he had time to combine this force with the forward force of his sword of Mount Kuan, he felt that his shoulder was lightly tapped. In a split second, the magic power that filled his entire body collapsed with a loud bang, no longer listening to his commands. The illusion that could hide from Moonless was also broken. His body, which had been tempered hundreds and thousands of times, became extremely weak, causing Wang Lu to fall down involuntarily. Everything seemed to be irreversible. However, as a non-phase cultivator, his unyielding spirit had already penetrated deep into his bone marrow. Therefore, at the moment when he was about to hit the ground, Wang Lu revolved the already solidified king pill, squeezing out a trace of magical power from it. Although it was just a trace of magic power, it was enough for enlightened king pill to cast a simple spell. Wang Lu's figure suddenly fell down, directly merging with the ground. The tidy stone floor was as soft as water, and he forced his way in. This was the earth escape technique that commanded the earth. Wang Lu's response was extremely fast. After sinking into the ground, he quickly sorted out his magical power and further controlled the earth escape technique, trying to move as fast as possible in the earth. He had experienced 2 trips across the 3,000 worlds, so he was no longer a person blessed by the 9 regions. However, the earth escape technique was like a magical seed, which took root and germinated in his jade mansion. He was confident that his attainment in the earth escape technique was stronger than the vast majority of cultivators with earth heavenly spirit root. As long as he was given a breath of time, he could escape dozens of miles away. Unfortunately, he didn't manage to get this breath of time. The moment he sank into the ground, the earth trembled and cracked. A large amount of soil and gravel were shaken into the sky, and the surrounding spiritual energy became wild and disorderly. Wang Lu's jade mansion suffered a violent impact, and the trace of magical power that he managed to condense with great difficulty flowed away. Once again, he felt an unprecedented sense of emptiness and powerlessness, and with a plop, he fell into the pit. This time he really couldn't escape. Wang Lu had no choice but to turn over and face the person that he didn't want to face no matter what. Yo, long time no see. He waved his hand and greeted her. Humph, long time no see indeed. Wang Wu snorted, with a smile yet not a smile on her face. Her eyes flickered, which made Wang Lu feel a pain in the ass. In theory, this fellow should not know anything, but Wang Lu always felt that after coming back this time, it was likely that she would see something. 150 years ago, Wang Wu was an introverted and slow girl. However, in the Great War of the Fallen Immortals, she inherited the legacy left by the most astute and wise person at that time. In any case, Wang Lu felt that if it were him, he would have already seen that there was something wrong with him. Even if he didn't see it, he could pretend to have a problem and then blackmail her. So what should I do? In a flash, Wang Lu's mind turned hundreds of thoughts, but he couldn't think of any way. Finally, he decided to pretend to be stupid first, and then act according to the circumstances. After looking at him for a few seconds, Wang Wu sneered, took out something from her mustard seed bag and threw it over. It was a hot kettle. The hot water you want. Wang Lu directly threw away the hot kettle, thought for a moment, and then said, "The temperature is not right." As a result, Wang Wu directly jumped into the pit, slapped him on the head, and then pulled Wang Lu's collar to pull him up. "The temperature is not right? You traitorous disciple want to rebel, don't you? After a few months of not seeing each other, your cultivation base has risen a lot, so you don't put me, the #1 king pill in 9 regions, in your eyes, do you? Do you think that just because I borrow some money from you, you can be above me? Let me tell you, money is not everything." After hearing this and looking at Wang Wu's righteous expression, Wang Lu suddenly felt that the dark cloud that had been troubling his mind had dissipated. The hesitation and uncertainty about the reunion was, in fact, completely unnecessary. Although it was still a bit difficult to really prepare to face everything in the past and present, it was not necessary to run away before facing it. In short, it was better to leave everything as it was. Compared with the relationship between his big brother and his junior sister, it seemed that this scene made him feel more like a fish in water. Therefore, after a slight sigh, Wang Lu tidied up his red and white robe, and then said to Wang Wu, "Since money is so useless, I don't want to insult you with useless things anymore." Upon hearing this, Wang Wu gawked and seemed a bit nervous. Then she continued to speak righteously, "If I don't go to hell, who will go to hell? Please insult me." "In short, why are you here?" Wang Lu asked. "Are you looking for me?" Seeing that Wang Lu no longer mentioned money, Wang Wu breathed a sigh of relief and then said, "Who has the leisure time to care about you? I came here at the request of the sect to explore the immortal dream land. Senior brother sect leader told me that there is no one in the entire 9 regions who is more suitable than me to enter the immortal dream land that only beautiful women can enter." Wang Lu thought for a moment and said, "I believe that uncle wants to emphasize that the key point is the king pill stage and below. In short, don't worry, I'm not here for you and no one will come for you." Upon hearing this, Wang Lu felt awkward. Not to mention anything else, the lead disciple of one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League ran away from home. Didn't it cause any shock? Although the decision to run away from home was made by him, the sect actually didn't give any response, which was really a bit disappointing. "Alas, it must be because I've been implicated by some unscrupulous master." Wang Wu seemed to have seen through Wang Lu's thoughts. She shrugged and said, "A few months ago you disappeared in the demon world. Everyone in Spirit Sword Mountain was really worried because of you. Later, when they heard that you accidentally appeared in the Southern Heaven region, the old guys in Heavenly Sword Hall, who were worried sick, prepared a welcoming banquet to wait for you to return to the mountain that night. However, they didn't expect that you actually didn't come. Moreover, you disappeared without a trace, standing all of them up. TSK at that time, those people's inconceivable and unbelievable faces are still fresh in my memory. I also used a spell to take a picture of it so that they can redeem it at a high price later." Wang Lu didn't know whether to feel warm or guilty. At that time there were all kinds of rumors on the mountain. The elders also began to use various methods to find your trace, because they were worried that you were kidnapped. However, there were also a few people with ulterior motives who speculated that you might have defected to the enemy. However, at the critical moment I came forward to set things right and helped you win your innocence. I told them that if you were the only one missing, then the problem is indeed complicated. But now, even Luli, who was sent to the Southern Heaven region for experiential learning, has not come back, so there's only one possibility. As Wang Lu listened, he inwardly imagined the most realistic possibility. In the turmoil, the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall must have asked Wang Wu to find Wang Lu by virtue of the relationship between master and disciple. And Wang Wu was certainly too lazy to move, so she used the reason that Wang Lu had betrayed and defected to the enemy, so it was better to pretend that he never existed. Then, she must have been scolded by the furious disciplinary elder and the sect leader, so she had to seriously think about the whereabouts of Wang Lu. However, looking at Wang Wu's appearance, Wang Lu really didn't dare to imagine what would be the result of her hard thinking on the Spirit Sword Mountain. I told everyone that you must have run away with little Lu Li, and then the two of you probably have already pledged to marry each other. Otherwise, how could little Lu Li be so easily abducted by you? Wang Lu was silent. He only regretted that he didn't use a bit more force when he kicked her just now. Wang Wu's reputation as the #1 king pill in 9 regions was indeed well-deserved, but as a cultivator of non-phase method, if he really wanted to find the flaw, it was not impossible. Wang Wu, with a congratulatory smile on her face, patted Wang Lu's shoulder. TSK, speaking of which, you kid are really fast, accurate and ruthless. So easily, you picked up the most eye-catching child face *** in Spirit Sword Mountain. But you don't have to worry too much. During this time, under my vigorous persuasion, the Heavenly Sword Hall elders no longer have much opinion about this. After all, in their minds you have always had a good impression, except for senior brother Zhou Ming. That old guy is very stingy. I asked him for dowry several times, but he said that he wanted to fall out with me. His face is really thin and worthless. Asking for dowry at this juncture, elder sister Wu, you're not beaten by Uncle Zhou's brilliant sword heart. It's really because of his self-restraint. Wang Wu continued, so, you actually don't have to leave in such a sorry state. Eloping is really nothing in Spirit Sword Mountain. Moreover, even if you don't think about yourself, you have to think about little Lu Li, right? No matter what, she is a dignified successor disciple of one of the 5 uniques. How could she spend her life with you without any status? Moreover, TSK, when she is in the critical moment of her king pill tribulation, you actually made her have a difficult birth. Your face is really too despicable. Before her voice fell, the training room suddenly trembled, and then the door was opened from the inside, revealing a fresh and curious face. 5th Martial Aunt? Who did you just say had a difficult birth? Lu Li stood at the door. Her temperament was clear and refined. Her cherry lips gently opened, and the fluctuation of king pill level magical power was completely revealed. Chapter 562. The path of cultivation had never been fair. Although the ultimate goal of a cultivator after setting foot on the immortal path was the unattainable ascension to become an immortal, for most of the cultivators in the world, they could not even touch the edge of the king pill realm even if they exhausted their entire life's efforts. Being able to successfully reach the Shudan stage was already considered an expert among ordinary cultivators. Of course, compared to the tens of billions or even hundreds of billions of mortals in the 9 regions, being able to possess spiritual roots and set foot on the path to immortality was already an extremely enviable opportunity. In such a cruel environment, the existence of a few geniuses overshadowed the efforts of the other mortals. Cultivators with heavenly spiritual roots were born with the ability to sense the existence of the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. After stepping on the path of immortality, their cultivation speed was several times faster than ordinary cultivators. Furthermore, many bottlenecks that troubled other cultivators were nowhere to be seen on the path of cultivation of geniuses. Lu Li was undoubtedly a genius among geniuses. Looking at Lu Li, who had just pushed open the door, even Wang Lu was somewhat envious of her smooth king pill tribulation. Originally, it was estimated that she would need about 10 days after her injuries healed, but in reality, only 5 or 6 days had passed, and she had seized the opportunity to succeed in one fell swoop. Forming the pill ahead of time naturally meant that she had to bear a huge risk, but behind the risk was a huge reward. Forming the pill ahead of time, not only did it not cause any flaws in the quality of her king pill, but because of this brave decision, the king pill had a sharp aura of forging ahead. Before Lu Li achieved the king pill, she was strong in offense but weak in defense. Now, because of the king pill stage, her defense had been greatly increased, completely above the ordinary king pill. However, the increase in her offensive power could be said to be terrifying, which made her offense and defense even more unbalanced. Although they had not actually fought, Wang Lu could vaguely determine that this junior sister of hers, who had just entered the realm of King Pill, had a pure attack power that was not below his own. Once she advanced to the middle grade of King Pill, her attack power would only be above his. It was above a cultivator who had mastered the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi. Even if the sword demon were to come back to life, he wouldn't be able to do so in the King Pill realm. It could even be said that in the history of 9 regions, there were only a handful of people who could match Lu Li in terms of attack power. Congratulations, enlightened Lazarite. Wang Lu earnestly congratulated Lu Li on her amazing achievement. Even the nearby Wang Wu, in accordance with the usual practice, gave Lu Li a King Pill salute. This meant that from now on, Spirit Sword Sect's disciple Lu Li had the qualification to establish her own sect and be on an equal footing with the other senior cultivators. Of course, this qualification only existed in theory. For a disciple of one of the 5 uniques, the King Pill realm was far from the end. Therefore, Wang Wu quickly restored the amiable smile of an elder and went up to touch Lu Li's head. "This little fellow is really amazing." Lu Li giggled. Then Wang Wu touched her chest and exclaimed in surprise, "It got bigger again?" Before Lu Li could exclaim, Wang Lu had already unceremoniously stabbed Wang Wu with his primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi. "Put away your claws. Harassing a disciple is a crime of treason in Spirit Sword Sect. Be careful not to be caught by the third uncle and be punished with the punishment of eternal castration, henceforth turning into a stone woman." Wang Wu stretched out her finger to dissolve Wang Lu's sword chi and explained, "I'm just doing a physical examination on her. You know, the new King Pill might have some instability in the body. I can see that when you achieved the King Pill, you must have hurt your brain." Wang Lu took advantage of the situation to ridicule him, which made both him and Wang Wu startled at the same time. As if by prior agreement, they both recalled the scene when they reached Jindan. Then they fell into silence together. A moment later, Lu Li broke the silence and curiously asked, "Fifth uncle, what is dystocia?" "Well," after perfunctorily answering Lu Li's curiosity, Wang Lu was finally able to get to the point. The meeting with Wang Wu was purely accidental. However, after the accident, the dungeon raid couldn't be stopped. Before continuing, the two must exchange the progress of the dungeon raid to avoid interfering with each other. Wang Lu touched his chin. Where should I start? Is that Moonless you're doing?" Wang Wu sneered. "That non-mainstream person who makes herself look like a hermaphrodite?" Incisive evaluation. "In short, did you completely subdue her?" "It's easy. My telepathic finger made her forget her surname. By the way, are you interested in my new invention? I can teach you." Wang Lu also sneered. "Forget it, I have a weapon that's sharper than the telepathic finger." Wang Wu asked with a somewhat strange look, "A sharper weapon? What do you mean?" "If there's a chance, I'll let you see it. In short, you've subdued Moonless, and now you've come to Sky City. What are you going to do?" Wang Wu said, "Of course, it's to use Moonless as a stepping stone to find a way to get rid of the supreme leader of the Temple of Heaven and then replace him. Don't you claim to be a professional adventurer? You still can't see such a simple thing. You should know that the supreme leader of the Temple of Heaven is roughly equivalent to a supreme-level cultivator in 9 regions, right?" "I know, so what?" Wang Wu inexplicably looked at Wang Lu. "That old thing Feng Yin's strength is also equivalent to the supreme level. I've been planning to overthrow his brutal rule for so many years, but nothing happened. It can be seen that the supreme level is actually not that great. After all, I'm the number 1 King Pill in 9 regions." Wang Lu inwardly sighed, thinking that this pretentious act could be given full marks. Of course, he knew that the theoretical biggest benefit of this immortal dreamland was to get rid of the Temple of Heaven and establish a new religious regime. The problem was that it could not be done in practice. That supreme leader alone had the cultivation base of supreme level. With Wang Lu's current strength, he could not handle it, and no King Pill could. Not to mention that the opponent was not a lone person but a huge organization. The immortal dreamland restricted the strength of the participants to not exceed the level of King Pill. In fact, the strategy to restrict the participants must be within a certain framework. Otherwise, if a team of supreme-level cultivators were allowed to come in, they could easily destroy the Temple of Heaven, and then expand the heavenly earth into their own harem. This immortal dreamland would then become purely a lewd dreamland. It was even more exaggerated to think that if one had absolute force, they could even break the passage between the heavenly earth and the chaotic world. After unifying the world, they could lead the female army into the chaotic world and unify the 2 worlds. At that time the benefits would be even more. However, there was no such amiable immortal dreamland in the group of immortal tombs, and the king pill level restriction could only make these plans a mere fantasy. However, even the Dixian people who designed the group of immortal tombs probably did not expect that there would be a perverted king pill cultivator in the future to smash the scene. In this immortal dreamland, perhaps moonless harmonious heaven was originally set to be the biggest enemy, and the high-level people of Sky City were just background settings. But now the biggest enemy was killed by a single finger, and the background settings were put on the stage. However, could a mere Wang Wu really confront the Temple of Heaven under the command of a supreme-level cultivator? After being her disciple for so many years, he actually had an assessment of the limit of her strength. As the number 1 king pill in 9 regions, Wang Wu was indeed powerful to the point of making one's hair stand on end. Let alone the other king pill cultivators, even among the Yuanying stage cultivators, almost no one was her opponent. Even the slightly weaker deity stage cultivators were not enough, such as Moonless. However, King Pill after all had its limit. Even if she had a double King Pill, she could only deal with middle-level deity stage cultivators, and it would be difficult for her to win against high-level deity stage cultivators. As for those who surpassed deity stage and reached the level of supreme, it would be difficult for her to even save her life. Of course, it was already shocking for a king pill to be able to do this. However, Wang Wu seemed to have a well-thought-out card up her sleeve, as if she really thought that she could swallow the Temple of Heaven, this behemoth. Wang Lu thought, could it be that Sister Wu has been hiding her true strength for so many years? At the same time, he also modified his own plan based on her plan. For a moment he was lost in thought. Seeing this, Wang Wu curiously asked, "What are you thinking about?" "I was thinking, if I go to the Temple of Heaven at this time to expose you, how many benefits will I get?" "Damn you, this rebellious disciple. Deceiving your master and destroying your ancestors is as natural as drinking water? I'm just not used to standing on the side of a loser. Who told you that I will fail? This time my odds of winning are quite big, okay?" Wang Wu explained, "The supreme leader of the Temple of Heaven is about to retire. At present, the temple is preparing for the change of leadership. This is a God-given opportunity." "The supreme leader still has the concept of retirement?" "Of course there is. The Temple of Heaven is a religious organization, and the power of religious leaders usually comes from the heaven, not from themselves. The leader of the Temple of Heaven indeed has the strength of a supreme, but excluding the religious blessing, his body is at most just a high-level deity stage cultivator. In fact, the middle and high-level monks of the Temple of Heaven are like this. Once they retire from their position, their cultivation base will plummet." Wang Lu nodded. "So that's how it is. No wonder you can kill the deity stage Moonless with one finger. This kind of power from the outside world has its flaws, right?" "Exactly. But even so, it is not worth the loss to confront a supreme, so I consider looking for an opportunity during the change of leadership. After this Chengtian retires, there are 7 competitive candidates. In addition to the 6 Shenshens, there is also the extremely powerful harmonious heaven of the western regions. The 7 people have equal opportunities. They have been secretly fighting for several years, but there is still no definite result. However, the change of leadership is imminent. I'm afraid it won't be long before the conflict will fully intensify, and at that time my opportunity will come." Through Moonless Palace of Heaven? Wang Lu reacted very quickly and immediately guessed Wang Wu's plan. The 7 candidates had been competing for several years without any result, indicating that the competition of Chengtian relied more on the forces under their control, rather than the direct designation of heaven. In fact, since heaven was not a personified god, of course, it would not directly show its spirit to designate Chengtian as the candidate. The 7 candidates occupied the peak of power in heavenly earth. Each of them had supporters behind them, but it was difficult to distinguish who was superior. Then at this time, Palace of Heaven, which had always been independent, became an important force that was enough to affect the balance and even determine the result. So the attitude of Moonless was particularly important. Although the status of the 7 candidates was higher than that of Moonless, they were bound to actively strive for her support. And in this process Wang Wu's opportunity came. She could take the opportunity of the meeting between the two sides to ambush the candidates and turn them into obedient meat slaves with the telepathic finger. Then, with the full support of Moonless, she would support her own meat slave to the position and indirectly control heavenly Earth from then on. Thinking of this, Wang Lu had to sigh that Wang Wu's idea was really ingenious. In fact, my chess pieces are not only Moonless. According to my plan, when the time comes for the final battle between the 7 candidates, I want to have at least 3 harmonious heaven monks and at least 15 open heaven monks. This kind of power will be enough to form an independent 8th party. Only then will I be able to truly secure victory. With so many people, are you going to use your personal charm to summon them? Wang Wu was dismissive of this. How can an illusory personal charm compare to the telepathic finger? Chapter 563. After listening to Wang Wu's grand idea, Wang Lu once again fell into contemplation. Although it seemed that her idea was somewhat fantastical, rationally speaking, there was not much problem with the feasibility. After all, if Wang Wu, this abnormal king pill, joined this immortal dreamland, it would be easy to form a crushing situation. Not to mention that she also had telepathic finger. In this world without men, she was simply lawless. Of course, this was not accurate enough because there was still a man in heavenly Earth, and it was a strong man whose function was absolutely superior to a mere telepathic finger. However, Wang Lu would not be stupid enough to jump out and work for Wang Wu at this time. 3 harmonious heavens and 15 open heavens. If a strong and fierce man were to deal with them, it would be a disaster. Therefore, it was better to let Wang Wu show off her telepathic finger. At worst, it would just be tenosynovitis. However, there was still a problem. According to Wang Wu, the time of the Temple of Heaven's succession was not far away. Would it be too late to subdue the 18 high-level people one by one? Of course it's too late. There is still a week before the succession ceremony, and I still have a lot of helpers here. You still have helpers? Wang Lu began to feel that something was wrong. You didn't come alone? Yes, Feng Yin and the others think that this is a rare experiential learning opportunity. If they only consider the magical treasures in the immortal dreamland, it would be a pity. It is better to take this opportunity to let the younger generation gain experience and broaden their horizons. Therefore, they want me to lead the team and bring almost all the talented female disciples in the sect whose cultivation base is around King Pill. Wang Lu was shocked. His sect head Uncle Master's brain flooded with water. It is rare for Lingjian school to have a few pure flowers, but they are actually handed over to you. Aren't you afraid of ruining them? What do you think I am, this traitorous disciple? A humanoid telepathic finger? I will not make a move on my own disciple. Really? Who was the one who wanted to marry me when he saw my wealth? You still have the nerve to mention that time. Wang Wu stomped her foot on the spot. It's rare for me to propose to someone, but you rejected me without hesitation. He simply doesn't put the dignity of a teacher in his eyes. Sorry, your dignity as a teacher is too insignificant. I really can't see it. In short, I brought quite a few people with me this time. With their help, we have more than enough time. Who are they? First, there's Yao. She's the strongest, and she's strong enough to hold her own. I wanted her to deal with 8 open heavens within 3 days and give them to me to train. It's only been half a day, and she's already dealt with 2. Wang Lu narrowed his eyes. Eldest senior sister. As expected of the sect leader's direct disciple. Yes, after achieving the King Pill, Yao has finally completely digested the inheritance of the ancient sword tomb. In terms of swordsmanship alone, she can already compete with the elders of some high-rank sections. Thinking of the eldest senior sister whose attainment in swordsmanship was so strong that even the genius Luli had to concede defeat, Wang Lu was not surprised that she could easily deal with the open heavens who were equivalent to Yuanying stage. Then there's Shixian and that stupid cat. The fighting ability of this spirit beast group is a bit worse. I assigned them 6 targets and now they've solved one of them. Their progress seems to be barely able to catch up. Wang Lu was quite surprised. Even Bai Shixian has come out of the mountain? She's actually willing to come out with you? In Wang Lu's impression, the daughter of Grand Cloud Fairy had a tranquil and natural character, and didn't like to go out for experiential learning. In addition to him, it was difficult for ordinary people to call her. Of course, it's because of my personal charm. Wang Wu was full of confidence. Anything else? The last two people are the non-combat group, Yu Xinyao and Little Lingair. Before she could finish, Wang Lu interrupted in surprise. Feng Ling? Why is she here? Didn't they say that she can't leave the Blue River region? Before, it was indeed impossible, but during the period when you were missing, the Heavenly Sword Hall developed a mountain range seal. As long as you carry this seal, no matter where you are, it's the same as being in the Spirit Sword Mountain. This time I called Little Lingair to come with me because I want to test the effect of the mountain range seal. At present, it seems that the effect is good, and her strength can also be exerted in the Southern Heaven region. Therefore, although it's a non-combat group, when necessary, she must have the ability to protect herself. Wang Lu nodded. I understand. 2 combat groups, 1 soy sauce group, plus yourself, there's enough manpower. In a week's time, there's indeed enough time to capture those 18 people. Moreover, even if there's a problem in the middle and you don't capture all the targets, you can still count on Moonless, the leader of the Palace of Heaven, which you already have in your hand. It's enough to ensure that your next plan can be carried out smoothly. Yes, and if I can capture all the targets, I can even go further. I don't need to support any puppets, but instead, I can personally inherit the Temple of Heaven and completely control the Temple of Heaven and even the heavenly earth. Wang Wu said and then turned to look at Wang Lu. According to the original calculation, if I want to perfectly implement this plan, I'm still a bit short on manpower, so my goal is not set too high. But now that I've met you and Little Luli, I think I might as well do things perfectly. How about it, do you want to help me? You and Luli should also need this kind of actual combat experience, right? Sure. Wang Lu thought for a moment. If they had the support of Wang Wu, he and Luli even dared to challenge the harmonious heaven-level opponents. Thus he nodded in agreement. Good, then come with me to the stronghold first. You and Luli take a rest. After you fully recover, I'll take you to participate in the action. Under the leadership of Wang Wu, the group of 3 came to an exquisite and gorgeous courtyard in Sky City. This was a real estate purchase by a Kotian-level nun in Sky City. Although the location was not in the center of the city, it was still very valuable. However, when that Kotian-level nun was knocked out by Zhu Shiyao in an ambush and sent to Wang Wu to have a taste of telepathic finger, she obediently handed over the real estate. Now it had become Wang Wu's stronghold. When Wang Lu came to the entrance of the courtyard, he saw a girl in the courtyard holding a volume of swordsmanship book. She was reading it while walking, and her eyes were in a trance. When she heard the footsteps at the entrance of the courtyard, the girl's thoughts were interrupted. She turned her head and suddenly showed an incredible look. Oh, senior brother Wang Lu, it's you? Wang Lu waved his hand. Junior sister Yu, long time no see. Where have you been all this time? Yu Xinyao put down the swordsmanship book in her hand and impatiently asked. Everyone is so worried about you. It's a long story. After Wang Lu finished speaking, he saw that Yu Xinyao's eyebrows were slightly wrinkled and her eyes were moist. Obviously, she was not satisfied with this answer. Wang Lu had no choice but to helplessly shrug his shoulders and said with a smile, in short, I had a good dream. Sweet dreams? Yu Xinyao curiously tilted her head, but then she suddenly saw that after Wang Lu left, Luli, who was holding a bag of candy, ran into the courtyard with a face full of interest. She then threw herself to the ground, hugged Wang Lu's arm, shook it, and said in a spoiled manner, Senior brother, I still want that candy. Can you reward me a little more? Yu Xinyao was immediately stunned. Her eyes inconceivably swept between Wang Lu and Luli, and then her expression quickly turned gloomy. So the good dream that senior brother said is, I'm sorry, just now, in a moment of desperation, Xinyao was too abrupt and asked a question that I shouldn't have asked. Please forgive me, senior brother. Wang Lu was baffled. What do you mean rude? Yu Xinyao refused to say anything more and shook her head. I'm sorry, I don't feel very well, I'll take my leave first. With that, the girl flew out of the courtyard on her flying sword and flew in the other direction of Sky City. Wang Lu watched Yu Xinyao's departing back. He was stunned and felt that he seemed to have encountered some kind of misunderstanding. Looking back, he saw Wang Wu's gloating smile. Little Lu, you're really a scum. What the? Being evaluated by the person who was the least qualified to criticize others as scum was simply a strange injustice. Wang Lu stared at his master's smiling face and was speechless for the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. After a long time, Wang Lu finally calmed down. When he was about to find Yu Xinyao to explain, he heard a person quickly coming in from outside the door. That crisp footstep, as well as the slightly rough action of pushing the door, were all characteristics of a certain person. Wang Lu turned around and greeted, "Long time no see, Sister Ling." As a result, before he could finish his words, Feng Ling angrily pointed at his nose and asked, "Just now I saw Xinyao go out crying, and when I asked, she only said you came back. What did you do to her?" "I just had a good dream." By the time he explained everything to Feng Ling and Yu Xinyao, a long time had already been wasted. After the misunderstanding was solved, Yu Xinyao and Feng Ling were extremely embarrassed and apologized to Wang Lu. However, just as Yu Xinyao raised her head full of self-blame, she heard a burst of footsteps outside the door. It turned out that Bai Shixian and the cat girl Ling Yan had returned. Seeing Wang Lu in the courtyard, the two spirit beast girls were taken aback, but Ling Yan obviously showed a disgusted expression and then hid in the shadow behind Bai Shixian. As for Bai Shixian, she calmly nodded to Wang Lu and then said, "Half a day ago, I met several Yin and Yang School's junior sisters outside Gorgeous Town. They asked me to say hello to you, senior brother." Okay. An ominous premonition rose in Wang Lu's heart. They also said that next time we have a chance to play together, the way we play will certainly satisfy you. They are deliberately playing with me, aren't they? Bai Shixian looked at Wang Lu, and then looked at Lu Li, and then continued, "They said that next time they will never lose to Lu Li." The nearby Yu Xinyao gently covered her mouth. Her eyes wandered between Wang Lu and Lu Li for a moment, and then she sighed, covered her face and walked away. Feng Ling fiercely glared at Wang Lu, and then accompanied Yu Xinyao to leave. Wang Lu blankly watched the two people gradually go further and further away, thinking that this was the so-called Azura field. Behind him, his master considerately patted his shoulder and asked, "Do you need me to teach you telepathic finger to solve the crisis?" Chapter 564. For many people who were doomed to live a lonely life, the Azura field was actually a happy worry. However, in the Azura field, Wang Lu really couldn't be happy. Because of a joke made by a few unrestrained women from Yin and Yang School, a group of junior sisters from his own school accidentally became hostile to him. That stupid cat picked up from the Grand Cloud Mountain looked at him, as if she was looking at those bastard men from Beast Master School, perverts. And although Bai Shixian always had a spring breeze-like smile on her face, the distance between them was actually a few steps further than usual. Even the most well-behaved Lu Li was pulled to the side by Feng Ling, telling her to keep her distance from that scum. At first, Lu Li certainly didn't want to, but after the lady boss of the Spirit Creek town took out a box of snacks, she readily complied. At that time, Wang Lu narrowed his eyes. He painstakingly protected little Lu Li from the King Pill tribulation, but in the end, she was bribed by a box of snacks. However, before long, Lu Li took advantage of Feng Ling's unpreparedness to sneak over to Wang Lu and lifted the box of snacks in her hand. "Senior brother, do you want to taste it? Sister Lingling's craftsmanship is great." Wang Lu was moved. He reached out and touched Lu Li's head. "I really didn't dote on you in vain." Unfortunately, among this group of people, only Lu Li was still standing on his side. Wang Wu, the bitch who could be called the culprit, was gloating all the way. She didn't even bother to pay attention to her own business, and just watched the excitement for half a day. And when Wang Lu asked her to make an objective statement, she laughed. "I still have business to do, so I can't play with you guys anymore. You guys can slowly quarrel with each other, but don't hurt the harmony, ha ha ha." And then before leaving, she affectionately blew a kiss. What af *king malicious intent. At this time, Wang Lu couldn't help but think of the time travel dream. The parting kiss between Ouyang Shang and Wang Wu. Thinking of that scene, he couldn't wait to take an iron file and grind his lips off. Sigh, it's really hard to communicate with those who don't have enough IQ. Forget it, I can't be bothered to entertain them. Let them continue to be stubborn. Xiao Liuli. Let's go and find a chance to push harmonious heaven away. In the face of this dogshit-like situation, Wang Lu resolutely decided to withdraw. Rather than stay and reason with a few angry women, he felt that it was easier to push down harmonious heaven. Moreover, it was more in line with the needs of this trip. Of course, the so-called simple was only relative. Wang Lu and Lu Li, according to the map left by Wang Wu, successfully ambushed an ascetic nun who came to Sky City from afar. Even though they had ambushed first and had the advantage of time and place, the battle was still thrilling. Looking at the person who was tied up like a dumpling with the immortal binding rope, Wang Lu was filled with emotions. The harmonious heaven stage and the deity transformation stage were truly extraordinary. Even though they had used a concealment spell to launch a joint attack with Skybreaker, they were able to severely injure their opponent in the blink of an eye. Then, after a hard fight, they were finally able to take down the ascetic nun who had never been in actual combat for more than 100 years. The gap between King Pill and deity transformation stage was really too big. Judging from the result of this battle, Wang Lu reckoned that even if his cultivation base reached the peak of King Pill and his non-phase method reached the theoretical peak of King Pill, he would at most have the power to protect himself in front of a deity transformation stage cultivator. Moreover, it was limited to low-level deity transformation stage. Encountering an opponent like Moonless, even if Wang Lu had the cultivation base of King Pill, he could only escape at most, and it was impossible for him to face the opponent head-on. Thinking of the number 1 King Pill in 9 regions who easily subdued Moonless with telepathic finger, Wang Lu had to sigh with emotion that the road of immortal cultivation was really long and boundless. Who the hell are you? Attacking the ascetic nun of the Temple of Heaven without authorization? Don't you want your life anymore? Wang Lu's thoughts were interrupted by the angry and ashamed voice of the ascetic nun. Looking down, he saw the tall girl, who seemed to be only about 26 or 27 years old, struggling powerlessly under the restraint of the binding immortal rope. You will suffer the wrath of heaven. Most of the ascetic nuns of the Temple of Heaven were a group of people with stubborn but gentle temperament. Many of them would not change their smile even when facing a sword. They firmly believed that all the suffering was a test given by heaven, and their pace on the immortal path would become more solid with the passing of the suffering. Therefore, for this girl to angrily question, struggle and even curse, she must have experienced quite serious pain and torture. However, Wang Lu knew that from the beginning to the end of the previous fight, he and Lu Li were almost always suppressed. It was not until the injury caused by the ambush could no longer be suppressed that the fight came to an end. From the beginning to the end, if one wanted to talk about torture, it was his side who suffered more. Under the full counterattack of a Taoist Master of Deity stage, keeping his non-phase sword defense from breaking, and providing an opportunity for Lu Li to fight back was simply a fantasy for a King Pill level cultivator. Even though her actual strength after the sneak attack was only below peak Yuanying stage, Wang Lu still had to break more than 100 of his non-phase sword bones before he was finally able to support himself. And now he who was trying his best to recover from his injury didn't complain, so what could she complain about? Was it because the binding immortal rope used a tortoiseshell technique to bind her? That should be no big deal, right? Moreover, the truth of this matter was, although Wang Lu knew how to use the magical treasure binding immortal rope, he was not good at binding. If he didn't accidentally see the tortoiseshell technique on the album that his master left in the bedroom, if he wanted to bind people, he could only tie them into a cocoon. Moreover, what was wrong with the tortoiseshell technique? It could perfectly display the beautiful figure of a woman, which could be called art. As a captive, she could actually enjoy the treatment of art. Wang Lu really couldn't understand what this ascetic nun was angry about. However, there was no need to understand. Now that he had caught the person, he just needed to bring her back to Wang Wu's secret stronghold outside Sky City. After being trained by her telepathic finger, the mission would be complete. Although this battle was difficult, the harvest was exceptionally rich. Not to mention that his non-phase sword art was directly promoted by 2 levels. Even the King Pill in his Jade Mansion, under the heavy pressure, showed signs of further transformation. This battle was enough to be worth several months of hard work, which could be considered as a big profit. Although the profit was a little strange, it was a little strange. Under normal circumstances, there was no such thing as fighting to nurture fighting. The belligerent would die. This was the conclusion of the ancient saying, because the battle itself could not provide enough profit to pay for the cost. The breakthrough in the battle was actually built on the basis of a large amount of accumulation in the early stage, a momentary burst of inspiration. Even for those evil cultivators who were good at refining flesh and blood for their own use, after a fierce battle, it would take a long time to really digest the enemy's flesh and blood, and the efficiency would not necessarily improve by much. However, Wang Lu recently experienced the taste of nurturing fighting with fighting. After every hard battle, he could feel that his strength was improving by a visible margin, which completely broke the common sense of the immortal cultivation world. In fact, from the beginning of the King Pill realm, Wang Lu vaguely found that his own path of cultivation had changed from the beginning. The King Pill, his body, and his primordial spirit were easily stimulated by the battle and thus transformed. In other words, it was easier to get benefits in the battle. Thinking about it carefully, perhaps when he condensed the King Pill, the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi and the non-phase method were also combined with something else. The King Pill of a cultivator carried not only his power, but also his life. When a brilliant cultivator reached core formation, they would put everything that they had experienced in their own path of cultivation into it. And Wang Lu's path of cultivation was undoubtedly one adventure after another. From the experiential learning in the small clear sky peak during the body forging stage, to the wisdom sect during the chi cultivating stage, to the elite of the 10,000 arts sect during the foundation establishment stage, and to the Shudan stage to the magnificent adventure journey. He left his own footprints in the Grand Cloud Mountain, the ancient sword tomb, and the Western continent, and even created a legend. Unfortunately, after one battle after another, Wang Lu's immortal cultivation gain was lackluster. Although his talent was excellent and he could quickly make up for it through secluded cultivation, after all, it seemed to be a waste of time. Unexpectedly, after the King Pill, this defect seemed to have been made up. People often said that the King Pill of cultivators was boundlessly mysterious. Even those supreme who had a foothold in the immortal path couldn't completely crack its mystery. Therefore, for a time Wang Lu couldn't analyze the mystery of his King Pill. However, in short, it was a good thing, so he just accepted it for the time being. On the other side, Luli also seemed to enjoy a similar treatment. Although the girl was tired and the magical power in her jade mansion had been consumed by 80 to 90%, her eyes had become sharper. Obviously, her sword intent had been sublimated in the battle, which also realized the battle to nurture the battle. Speaking of which, little Luli has also experienced a lot of things with me. Could it be that she was affected by this? While thinking, Wang Lu transported his spoils of war and quietly walked toward Wang Wu's stronghold. An hour later, he saw Wang Wu in an ordinary house 100 miles away from Sky City. "You're done already?" Wang Wu looked at Wang Lu with some surprise. "As a man, your speed is unexpectedly fast." And when she saw Wang Lu put down the ascetic nun from his shoulder, Wang Wu's eyes lit up. "Good binding. It's actually an ascetic nun, a top-notch material. This time I'll make you a top-notch meat slave." With that, Wang Wu got up and walked to the front of the ascetic nun. She stretched out her finger and pointed it at the center of her forehead. The next moment, the ascetic nun, who was known for her tenacious willpower, suddenly trembled. Her closed eyes suddenly opened and incredulously looked at the woman in white in front of her. The slender finger was still pointed at the center of her forehead. After only a moment, the skin of this divinity transformation stage cultivator began to redden, and sweat poured down like rain. Her eyes too began to wander and become vacant. The woman's lips gently opened and unconsciously let out a groan, as if she had experienced great pain. However, what kind of pain could make an ascetic nun lose control like this? With just a glance, Wang Lu could not help but take a deep breath. What could make an ascetic nun unable to resist was, of course, not pain but pleasure, extreme pleasure. Damn, so this is the true face of telepathic finger. I've been looking forward to this scene for nothing. But, in general, Sister Wu, you really have a skill. Using this telepathic finger to deal with an ascetic nun who has never tasted meat, I'm afraid the damage would be doubled. No wonder you say this is a top-notch material. As time went by, the groan of the ascetic nun became louder and louder. While Wang Lu was repeatedly clicking his tongue at the scene before him, a girl's voice suddenly came from behind him. "What is Fifth Aunt doing?" Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled. "Little Luli, why are you here?" Luli was baffled. "I came back with you, senior brother. But I didn't let you enter the room. This scene is not suitable for children. You little guy better not." Before he could finish, he heard the ascetic nun let out a high-pitched scream. Her whole body trembled violently, and the robe between her legs revealed a clear water stain. Ah, senior brother, look, she actually peed. Luli pointed at the woman on the ground in surprise, and then thoughtfully sighed. Deity stage cultivators can also pee. Wang Lu thought for a moment, and then, taking advantage of the fact that the smell of lust in the air had not yet become strong, he explained to Luli, because your fifth aunt is using the long-lost bladder finger. This move is used to torture prisoners. It's very dirty, and there's nothing to see. So, quickly go outside and play. Oh. Chapter 565. After sending Luli away, the training in the hut began again. Wang Wu's telepathic finger indeed had a miraculous effect on the Temple of Heaven nun. In theory, the ascetic nun who could endure thousands of cuts without batting an eyelid could only persist until the second round of telepathic finger before she completely lost the will to resist and began to lose consciousness. After the third and fourth round, the poor nun was completely lost. There was a significant change in her eyes. From the initial firmness, it gradually softened, and soon it transitioned to confusion and intoxication. The whole process only took Wang Wu half an hour. An hour later, when Wang Wu got up and withdrew her finger, the already soaked ascetic nun was reluctant to part with her. She leaned against Wang Wu's leg and looked up at her with an extremely eager gaze. "Do you want it?" Wang Wu asked. She nodded without hesitation. If you want it, wait until tomorrow." The ascetic nun immediately showed an unbearable expression. "What do you want? I'll give it to you. Please don't leave me alone." Simple pain was not difficult to bear for the ascetic nun, but the emptiness after the bliss was worse than any pain. Wang Wu shrugged. "Unfortunately, today's share has been used up." "Impossible," the ascetic nun decisively judged. "That's not an unbearable consumption for you. Yes, I do have spare energy, but I also have a lot of people who need to be taken care of. There's no reason for me to waste too much of my precious physical strength on a prisoner of war, right?" But, Wang Wu smiled. "My telepathic finger is only open to my own people without restriction. If you want it, you have to give up your position and become my people. But, can you do it?" The ascetic nun indeed hesitated. Although her will was tortured by the telepathic finger to the point of collapse, her 100 years of cultivation and 100 years of faith were like an iron wall erected in her heart. Seeing her hesitation, Wang Wu pointed at Wang Lu and said, "If you are one of us besides the telepathic finger, you can also enjoy the ultimate heavenly weapon, which is far more effective. Unfortunately, you are devoted to serving the heavens, so you probably have no chance to see it." Wang Lu was shocked. "You pervert! How dare you drag me into this?" Wang Wu looked at him and provoked. "Are you not confident enough in your ultimate divine weapon?" Wang Lu was silent for a while, then he turned to the ascetic monk and said, "My ultimate heavenly weapon is also known as the spear of piercing dead thorns. It has the ability to pierce through everything in reverse cause and effect. Once it is used, it can make the sky rain and the sun and moon change. Unfortunately, it is only open to my family. You have no chance to see it." As soon as these words came out, not only did the ascetic monk reveal a leisurely look of fascination, but even Wang Wu could not help but be surprised. "I can't tell that you're also a fierce warrior in the field of bragging." Wang Lu shook his head. "I'm telling the truth. If I didn't have the spear of piercing dead thorns, why do you think I have so many female followers? Why did the spirit of the Grand Cloud Mountain not hesitate to sacrifice herself to help me achieve Shudan? Why did Aya abandon the throne of the Night King and return to the mountain with me? Qianghua is the pride of the lead disciple of Shangjing. Why did she concede defeat to me several times?" As Wang Wu listened, her eyes could not help but widen. "Now that you've said it, it seems to be somewhat reasonable." Wang Lu glared at Wang Wu. "If you don't believe me, you can try it yourself, but you'd better be mentally prepared." While Wang Wu was stunned, the ascetic monk, who had been listening by the side, gritted his teeth and weighed the pros and cons in his heart. I understand, please let me follow you." 100 years of faith collapsed just like that. "Seriously, what is going on with your telepathic finger?" After sending away the seductive ascetic monk who had completely become Sister Wu's slave, Wang Lu couldn't help but ask curiously, "You still don't understand?" It's actually a variant of primordial spirit skill. Primordial spirit skill. Wang Lu remembered that he had heard the elders mention it when he was in class at the Tong Cloud Hall. The so-called primordial spirit skill usually referred to the skill that targeted the opponent's primordial spirit. Because the existence of a cultivator was fundamentally based on the primordial spirit, once the primordial spirit was damaged, no matter how great the magical power was, it would be useless. However, the primordial spirit was hidden in the Purple Mansion, protected by the physical body, Jade Mansion, and other layers of protection. If one wanted to penetrate the Purple Mansion and directly penetrate the primordial spirit, it was better to use powerful magical power to directly crush the opponent. Of course, common sense was common sense. After tens of thousands of years of development in the immortal cultivation world, there were always people who could find another way to bypass the outer protection of the Purple Mansion and directly affect the primordial spirit. This kind of skill was now spread among the major sections. Many evil cultivators hooked souls and refined living people into puppets. Some enchantresses charmed all living beings, causing high officials and dignitaries to become servants under their skirts. This skill could be regarded as a kind of primordial spirit skill. And the righteous cultivators naturally did not lack similar means, it was just that they would not easily use it. First, it was bad for their reputation. Second, after so many years, there were too many people who had suffered a loss from primordial spirit skill. The relevant defensive skills had been developed and perfected, so it was getting harder and harder to penetrate the primordial spirit. Of course, for those top-rank sects with rich collections, the so-called difficulty only depended on whether the cultivators in the sect were willing to study it or not. Among the 5 uniques, there was no lack of cultivators who used primordial spirit skill as their core method, so their strength was not necessarily weak. It was just that Wang Lu didn't know when his master learned such a skill. As far as the elders of the 5 uniques were concerned, the several elders of Spirit Sword sect were considered young, about 200 years old. In a place like Shangjing sect, most of them would not be able to wash away their disciple status. Even though they inherited the legacy of the Golden Generation and achieved amazing achievements in a short period of time, and their strength was not weaker than the other elders of the 5 uniques, but in terms of comprehensive method, they should be relatively deficient. Fortunately, the Lingjian school mainly focused on sword cultivation, and the cultivators used all kinds of sword arts as their core. One sword to break 10,000 methods, so it didn't matter if their all-roundness was lacking. For example, Wang Wu, in addition to her non-phase sword, she had almost no other strong point. However, with the illustrious reputation of the number 1 king pill in 9 regions, no one dared to provoke her. But now, it seemed that he had somewhat underestimated her. Thinking about it carefully, after inheriting the legacy of Ouyang Shang, she had the top perception in 9 regions. Since her 150 years of cultivation couldn't break the bottleneck of King Pill to Yuanying stage, then the horizontal development was enough for her to become the most versatile cultivator. However, in Wang Lu's impression, his master was indeed versatile. In eating, drinking, whoring, and gambling, she was indeed a master, but when it came to proper business, she was simply a waste wood. Primordial spirit skill, such a high-end thing, was completely incompatible with her. I know you must be slandering me in your heart, but I have to say, you have too many misunderstandings about me. Wang Wu put on a lonely master posture. Wang Lu said Don't forget, in the non-phase method that I taught you, the defense against primordial spirit skill is one of the key contents. In the beginning, I was afraid that you would be taken away by the infatuated girls in the immortal cultivation world as a sperm donor, so I carefully improved the method for you. If you don't have a deep understanding of primordial spirit skill, how could you do a good defense? Let alone telepathic finger is actually not a high-end skill. It only has a special effect on a few people. Wang Wu explained, the first one is like the little sisters of Yin and Yang school, who have no resistance to the pleasure of intimacy and only want to enjoy it. Telepathic finger is more to guide them to use their own power to dig out the source of happiness. The second one is religious fanatics like the Temple of Heaven monks. These people usually follow the precepts and often deliberately suppress their own desire, but they don't know that the more they suppress, the stronger the rebound. Wait a minute, just now, that ascetic monk who has never tasted the taste of meat is fine, but Moonless has countless beauties in her harem. A vassal lord of wine and forest of meat. Her? Wang Wu sneered and dismissively said. She is actually not as good as the ascetic monk. She seems extravagant, but she has always regarded herself as a political figure. Her every move has a strong purpose. Everything she does is superficial, and she has never enjoyed it from the bottom of her heart. People like her are actually stronger in suppressing their desire. Well, that makes sense. Therefore, telepathic finger is actually not a great skill. The name list I gave you was carefully selected. As long as you can capture them, my telepathic finger will be able to convert them to our faction. As long as there are enough people, we can seize power in one fell swoop at the general election. Wang Lu nodded and did not speak again. He just thought, not a great skill? If it was really that simple, the monks of the Temple of Heaven, who have been in political strife for thousands of years, would have already invented a similar method to unify the world. But while thinking, he suddenly heard Wang Wu ask, after talking about me, it's my turn to ask you. Boy, I haven't seen you for a few months, you should have experienced a lot of things, right? Wang Lu's heart sank. Why did this guy suddenly ask about this? This is really a sensitive topic. I haven't figured out how to deal with this problem of my previous life, but you suddenly began to be aggressive. You, this master, are really considerate. Moreover, are you sure you want to know the truth? The next moment, he heard Wang Wu say in a heavy tone, however, without those experiences, I'm afraid you will not see me here. Wang Lu let out a sigh and suppressed the chaos in his heart. That's right, I can't always avoid this problem. I have experienced 150 years of wandering and returning to this land, so I can't turn a blind eye to everything in the past. And since she wants to talk, then let's talk about it. Before he finished speaking, Wang Lu found that his master's expression changed from heavy to playful, a man of indomitable spirit in the past. To be able to appear in this country of women, you must have suffered a lot down there. Wang Lu inwardly exclaimed, what the f***? The trace of emotion that had just brewed in his heart suddenly vanished. This sudden turn of events was simply intoxicating. While Wang Lu was still stiff, his master had come close to him, put her arm around his shoulder, and comforted him with gentle words. But being a woman is actually quite good. Losing a piercing death thorn spear is indeed a loss, but I can teach you telepathic finger. When you practice it to the highest level, you can use all 10 fingers at the same time and win by quantity, and it is not impossible to defeat the piercing death thorn spear. You have to think about it a little bit. Wang Lu could hardly restrain the urge to nail her to the wall with the piercing death thorn spear. Chapter 566. 3 days later. The plan to use the death thorn spear to nail his unscrupulous master to the wall was not put into practice. After all, the gap between the genius king pill cultivator and the number 1 king pill in 9 regions was too big. Moreover, it would take at least 20 to 30 years of cultivation before Wang Lu could officially overthrow his master's ghostly reign. Thinking to this point, Wang Lu quite regretted that when he was still Ouyang Shang, he had to be so generous to leave all his inheritance to Wang Wu alone, so that 150 years later, no one could control this woman. However, from another point of view, this was not necessarily a bad thing. With a person like Wang Wu close to him, it was undoubtedly able to remind and urge him to work hard in cultivation, so that he could nail her to the wall as soon as possible. As a means to stimulate cultivation, it was actually a good thing. In addition, Wang Wu's entrapment plan progressed very smoothly. 3 days later, all the harmonious heaven and open heaven level monks on the list were collected, and then one by one, they were turned into Sister Wu's subjects. Among them, 2 of the more powerful harmonious heaven level monks were personally captured by Wang Wu. One of them, Wang Lu, who was by her side, witnessed how the number 1 king pill in 9 regions, within 3 breaths of time, overwhelmed a cultivator equivalent to middle-level deity stage on the battlefield, captured and trained her to maturity. The whole thing made people feel relaxed and happy. Without any superfluous tricks, a full-strength counterattack of non-phase method stunned the opponent, completely ignoring the huge difference between King Pill and Deity stage. When that harmonious heaven-level monk fell from the sky, Wang Lu simply could not understand that he and Wang Wu cultivated the same kind of method. Of course, what was even more refreshing was that Wang Wu chose the battlefield in the wilderness. Although there was no one coming and going, it was still in broad daylight. From the beginning to the end, The battle did not alarm anyone at all. Heavenly Earth was a world where the social structure was stable, and the Temple of Heaven controlled the overall situation. Small fights were fine, but once the war became intense, there was no reason for the Temple of Heaven not to discover the abnormality. And when one reached the deity stage, let alone fighting with others, in theory, even their every move should be included in the monitoring scope. After many years of improvement and development, the monitoring network carefully designed by the Temple of Heaven was full of loopholes under the efforts of the feudal vassal kings. Even if their own harmonious heaven-level monks were overturned, they would not be able to detect it, which was already amazing. Of course, an important reason for this was that the monitoring network of the Temple of Heaven, out of cost considerations, focused on the investigation after the incident. Only when someone reported the incident and confirmed the occurrence of the incident would a large number of resources be invested in the investigation of the incident. Therefore, every time Wang Wu hunted a target, she would immediately subdue its mind and body with telepathic finger. No one would report the situation, and naturally, the Temple of Heaven would not be alarmed. At present, the resources have basically been integrated. Including Moonless, there are a total of 4 harmonious heaven-level monks and 15 open heaven-level monks in our camp, which is insignificant in the entire Temple of Heaven system. However, our competitor is not this huge organization, but the 7 Xintian-level high-level managers of the temple. Among these 7 people, even the most popular one can only control 10 harmonious heaven-level monks. Moreover, this relationship is more based on political considerations and interests, and their loyalty to each other is very limited. It is completely different from the monks who have been trained by telepathic finger. Therefore, now, even if we are an independent force, in theory we also have the power to stir up the muddy water in the election. Inside the secret stronghold, Wang Wu put on a rare serious posture and analyzed the current situation for everyone with a serious look. Of course, it is far from enough to just stir up the situation, so the next step is to try to capture a Xintian-level candidate. In this way, through the confluence of the two forces, we can gain an overwhelming advantage in the election. And if the operation is good, we can even reach the sky in a single bound. Reach the sky in a single bound, is it that easy? Wang Lu asked. Of course it is not easy. The Temple of Heaven, as a bureaucratic religious institution, had increasingly strict class barriers. If a grassroots monk wanted to go all the way to the supreme heavenly level, it was bound to go through a long period of experience, and there were only a few cases where an exception was made. Even in the special period of the chaotic world's invasion and the outbreak of war, the election of the supreme leader of the Temple of Heaven was also particularly cautious. If Wang Wu tried to support a puppet to take the position, there was still some possibility. Although she would have to face great difficulties, it was too difficult to personally go into battle and reach the sky in a single bound. A stranger who had no foundation in the heavenly earth wanted to become the leader of the Temple of Heaven overnight. Where would the thousands of monks in the Temple of Heaven be placed? But since it was a religious organization, there would always be a shortcut to reach the supreme. Ask the heaven. Wang Wu softly said her answer. Ask the heaven. The so-called Ask the Heaven is a means by which the Temple of Heaven will submit it to the heaven for disposal when it encounters a very major problem that cannot be decided by normal procedures. After listening to it, Wang Lu frowned. Submit it to the heaven for disposal? Is it a game like inviting the pin spirit? You can understand it that way. Tisk, after all, it's a fraud, but isn't the heaven they serve an impersonal existence? Where does it have the ability to deal with problems? Wang Wu said, it's true that there is an impersonal existence, but don't forget, according to the records of the Temple of Heaven, it was this impersonal existence that sublimated the heavenly earth from the chaos and selected the human immortals from the vast number of living beings to reproduce. Do you think this is really something that an impersonal God would do? Well, if it is really impersonal, then in theory it will not take the initiative to do anything. However, for so many years, I have not heard of the Temple of Heaven implementing the procedure of Ask the Heaven. No, I have never heard of the saying of Ask the Heaven. The authority of Ask the Heaven is only open to a few people at the top level of the Temple of Heaven. If it is not a crisis related to the life and death of the Temple of Heaven and even the heavenly earth, who would bother an impersonal God? Moreover, every time the procedure is started, someone needs to pay a heavy price. A monk above Shintian level will lose most of her cultivation base. The Temple of Heaven has been established for thousands of years, and the number of times this procedure has actually been started is no more than 5, so it is normal that you did not know about it before. And once this procedure is started, it means that the God they serve will personally make a judgment, and this judgment naturally cannot be overturned by anyone. Hearing this, Wang Lu already understood, at the same time, the rules and regulations of the Temple of Heaven can only restrict themselves, but not the heaven. Therefore, even if the answer given by the heaven violates the teachings of the Temple of Heaven, it is the teachings that need to be changed, not the decision of the heaven that needs to be changed. In other words, if the result of Ask the Heaven shows that a newcomer named Wang Wu will inherit the position of heaven, then even if everyone is not convinced, they can only accept the reality for the time being, right? Yes, this is the ideal situation. Wang Lu said. 2 questions. First, are you sure that this procedure can be started if you want to? Second, how can you guarantee that the heaven will choose you? In fact, unless the heaven is blind, it will not choose its own people and choose you, an outsider. Wang Wu said with a smile. The first question is very simple. I don't need to care about the rules of the Temple of Heaven on the procedure of Ask the Heaven. In theory, it requires the consent of the Supreme Heaven and more than 4 Shintian-level monks to disturb the heaven with mundane matters. But this rule is actually meaningless because the heaven does not care about these procedures. As long as there are monks above the Shintian level who sacrifice themselves and propose to communicate with the heaven, then the procedure of Ask the Heaven will be started. Then, even if I violate the rules of the temple, the final decision of the heaven is still not allowed to be violated. So it doesn't matter if I violate the rules. The second question is indeed the key, and also the focus of the next step of the work. According to the normal development, it is impossible for the heaven to choose me to be its spokesperson in the world, but I think this matter can be discussed. Talk? How do you want to talk? The first step is to try to get in touch with the heaven, and then try to negotiate to see how high the price tag is to let her choose me. If the negotiation doesn't work, then some violent means can also be considered. What a good idea, Sister Wu. Threatening and blackmailing the gods, this kind of plan was probably only thought of by Wang Wu. Of course, logically speaking, it did make sense, but in practice, well, when you are punished by the heaven, I will remember to help you burn incense. Oh, who is incense? This joke is too cold. In short, it is a good idea to first figure out the details of the heaven. After all, only by knowing yourself and knowing your enemy can you win every battle. But the price of asking the heaven is huge, and once it is used, it will inevitably alarm the Temple of Heaven. Do you have any other way to contact the heaven? Wang Wu said with a smile, of course there is. In fact, almost everyone in the heavenly earth has a way to get in touch with the heaven. After all, this is completely different from letting the heaven make a decision on specific issues. Wang Lu's complexion changed slightly. You said that everyone knows the way. Do you mean the child bestowed by the heaven? It is the child bestowed by the heaven, a ceremony that everyone in the heavenly earth will experience. Unite with the beloved, and then ask the heaven to grant them a child. And the heaven will brew a new life for them according to the characteristics of the two people, which must be accompanied by the connection between people and the heaven. I understand the principle. The problem is, Wang Lu hesitated, who are you going to do the child bestowing ceremony with? According to the rules, the ceremony of communicating with the heaven with the beloved was not a simple kowtow and prayer. When praying for the heaven to grant them a child, the two people needed to devote themselves wholeheartedly and unite, so that the heaven could feel the close bond between the two, and only then could they be granted the continuation of their bloodline. In short, there must be a real husband and wife. Upon hearing this, Wang Wu laughed and pointed her finger at Wang Lu. Do you still need to ask? Of course it's you. And just when Wang Lu's hair stood on end, he saw Wang Wu point her finger behind him. It's your junior sister Lu Li, childish face, my favorite. Don't even think about it. Chapter 567. I think there is some misunderstanding between the two of us. Wang Wu said so. I didn't choose little Lu Li at random. I have a good reason. Wang Lu sneered. Yes, she's your favorite. Not to mention good reason, this reason is enough to make your blood boil. So this is a misunderstanding. To communicate with the heaven to carry out the child bestowing ceremony doesn't necessarily require a devout belief in the heaven, but the two people who carry out the ceremony must love each other wholeheartedly. If the feeling is not sincere enough, the heaven will ignore it. Wang Lu interrupted. You've just trained a large number of meat slaves who hold your leg and call you Sister Wu, so their feelings for you are absolutely sincere. Can't you just choose one of them? Of course not. How can their feelings be regarded as sincere? It's just that their minds are troubled by the primordial spirit skill and fall into a mental barrier. And my primordial spirit skill is bound to be ineffective in front of the heaven. Therefore I can only choose from us, and among them, little Luli is the most likely to fall in love with me. Wang Lu sneered. With me here, do you think little Luli will fall in love with you? Wang Wu also sneered. So what if you're here? You think too highly of yourself. It's easy for me to win Luli's heart. With that, she took out a delicate food box from her mustard seed bag. Almost at the same time, Luli's eyes turned to her, blazing like fire. That food box was a takeaway gift box made by a famous divine chef in 9 regions. For the gluttons in the immortal cultivation world, it was a rare delicacy, so there was no need to mention its attraction to Luli. Wang Wu lifted the food box and proudly declared, See, I've got the true love from little Luli. You call this true love? Wang Lu shook his head. This is seduction. Humph, I don't care how you want to define it. Even if little Luli's love for me is not passionate enough, I believe that in the ceremony, she will be enlightened by my telepathic finger and realize the happiness of being a woman, and then she will love me to death. In any case, this is the only way. You can't find anyone else to replace her. Wang Lu snorted. That's right. As for the others, big senior sister Zhu Shiyao didn't know what love was. All her passion was given to the immortal sword in her hand. Needless to say, Yu Xinyao was in the prime of her life. However, she and Wang Wu didn't have the slightest interaction. So naturally, there was no true love between them. As for Fengling, she indeed had a good relationship with Wang Wu, just like a sister. However, because of this, she could not be the object of the ritual. According to the doctrine of the Temple of Heaven, love between close relatives was not supported. Thus, in the end, it seemed that only Luli was feasible. But you still miss one person. Who? Wang Lu pointed at himself. Wang Wu was stunned. What do you mean? Wang Lu said coldly, Didn't you want to use the child bestowment ceremony to contact the heavens of this world? I'll play with you. You? That's me. Wang Lu frowned. Is there anything you're not satisfied with? The ceremony requires the two people to really love each other. Wang Lu rolled up his sleeves and bared his teeth. Don't worry, in the past I have learned from 7th uncle, so I can be considered as having a big tool and good skill. I guarantee that I can make you fall in love with me. As for whether you can make me fall in love with you, that depends on whether you're good enough. I say, Master, in any case, you're also a woman, don't tell me you can't do it in this aspect. Wang Wu angrily stomped her feet. You little bastard, you dare to question me? Just you wait, if I don't make you kneel down and beg for mercy, I won't be a woman anymore. Wang Lu sneered. Very well, then it's settled. I'll accompany you to play the child bestowment ceremony. During this period you can't harass other people. At this time Wang Wu's anger was slightly reduced. Upon hearing this, she was startled and realized that she seemed to have been deceived by her disciple. She could not help but sigh with emotion. You and I are master and disciple, why do you have to be so decisive? That makes sense. When the time comes, I will be a little gentler. Being provoked to this point, Wang Wu finally could not bear it anymore. Well, since you insist on doing things your own way, don't regret it when the time comes. The ceremony of the child bestowment ceremony should be very solemn. For the vast majority of people in the celestial world, this was a major ceremony that they had to experience at least once in their lives. Under the intimate union and sincere pleading, the children bestowed by the heavens would perfectly inherit the characteristics of the two lovers as the continuation of their lives. However, there were times of urgency in everything. For the child bestowment ceremony of Wang Wu and her disciple, there was no way to choose any auspicious date. 2 days later, the General Assembly of the Temple of Heaven would begin, and there was not much time left for them. The ceremony was set for the evening of the same day. The location was another private stronghold of Wang Wu. After this guy entered the immortal dream of heavenly earth, she fully displayed the characteristics of a cunning rabbit with 3 burrows, and set up a number of private strongholds outside Sky City. The reason why she changed the stronghold was to get rid of Fengling and the others. For some reason, they were unusually enthusiastic about the child bestowment ceremony of Wang Wu and her disciple, especially Fengling, who insisted on watching the whole process and recording it. No matter how the 2 people persuaded her, she would not listen. Therefore, they had no choice but to flee to another stronghold to avoid people's eyes and ears. Fortunately, this stronghold was actually in a sparsely populated barren mountain temple. Although it was remote, the sacrificial utensils and other props needed for the ceremony were all available. The 2 spent some time in the courtyard of the temple to set up and soon completed a simple ritual position. Then they stood in the middle of the position and looked at each other in dismay. There was a long silence. Wang Wu smiled. "It's not too late to regret." As he spoke, he rolled up his sleeves, revealing his snow-white wrists. Then he smeared a sparkling and translucent lubricant on his hands. His gestures were professional, but when he moved his wrists and fingers, the crackling sounds made people shudder. In the face of the naked threat, Wang Lu also smiled. "I'll say the same to you. If you admit defeat now, I won't laugh at you." With that, he took out 2 blue pills from his mustard seed bag and swallowed them. "What the hell, what's that?" Wang Wu was suddenly shocked. "You actually took drugs." Wang Lu wiped his mouth. "You think too much. Just now, those were just blueberry digestive pills." "Blueberry? Do you think I'm Luli? How could you say such a stupid lie? What, are you afraid?" "Bah," Wang Wu said and took the initiative to take half a step forward, trying to look down at Wang Lu. However, when she walked in front of Wang Lu, she was surprised to find her disciple was already more than half a head taller than her. Wang Wu suddenly understood. So this guy has already grown so big? No, this question was too stupid. His growth curve did not suddenly rise recently. In terms of height, when he finished the body refining stage, he had already surpassed her. It was just that she had never felt that he was this tall. Was it because he had achieved the king pill? No, a mere king pill realm was not worth mentioning. Not to mention that he was only a king pill. Even if he reached Yuanying stage, he was not qualified to be on equal footing with the number 1 king pill in 9 regions, let alone. Her momentary trance was soon interrupted because Wang Lu had keenly noticed that there were some changes in the surrounding atmosphere. The ritual that was previously arranged in the courtyard had begun to take effect, and the path of communication with the heaven was gradually formed. "Okay, get ready to start," Wang Lu snapped, breaking his master's brief trance. However, when they came back to their senses, both of them had to face an awkward question. What should they do? In theory, both of them knew the following process, but when they actually did it, they felt that their limbs and bones were not listening to them. Just now you said that you were domineering, why don't you dare to move now?" Wang Wu felt that her hands were cold and stiff, so she took the first step to provoke him. "Didn't you say that you have a big body?" "Let me open my eyes," Wang Lu calmly responded. "Even if you have a big body, you still have to be excited. Your appearance makes people not interested in you for a long time. Why don't you show me a little sincerity first?" "You want sincerity? That's easy." Wang Wu sneered and put her wet hand on her lapel. The glittering lubricant stained her chest, revealing half of the white skin hidden under the clothes. Wang Lu looked at her in surprise. He didn't expect this guy to actually have the courage to grab her lapel. This was the rhythm of naked. Although the master and disciple had lived together in non-phase peak for many years, and they had actually seen everything that should not be seen, but at this moment it had a different meaning. Thinking of the graceful curve under the white clothes of the woman in front of him, Wang Lu slightly narrowed his eyes. The next moment he saw Wang Wu's hand was completely inside her lapel, and then she took out a crystal stone from her bosom and activated it with her magical power. Suddenly, a burst of moaning sound rang, and the crystal stone reflected the scene of a man and a woman having sex. The rolling waves of flesh made people's blood boil. But Wang Lu was stunned. Your so-called sincerity is this thing? What, are you still not satisfied? This is one of the top 3 treasures in the Eastern Border region's Dark Hall list. The appearance and figure of both men and women are impeccable, and there are many tricks. What else do you want? Wang Wu smiled maliciously and said, "Don't tell me you just wanted to see something else? Do you think it's possible to communicate with the heaven with such a crystal stone? Then you do it, I'm at your mercy here. If you have the ability, just use it." Wang Wu very shamelessly kicked the ball back. F***ck, do you think I don't dare? Wang Lu also summoned up his courage, stepped forward, and then reached out to grab his master's lapel, almost face to face. At that moment both of them felt each other's breath, and their bodies stiffened at the same time. After a moment of silence, Wang Lu suddenly asked, "Speaking of which, in order to see the heaven, isn't the price a bit big?" "If you say so, it is indeed." Wang Wu's voice for some reason sounded slightly trembling. This was because she suddenly felt a bit nervous. This nervousness came out of nowhere, and she was deeply confused. Nervous? It's not like we're going through a heavenly tribulation, it's just a mere Wang Lu. But why do I feel that his figure looks vaguely familiar? Wang Lu said, "You said that, according to the Divine Temple's ancient records, the child bestowment ceremony requires two people to combine their bodies and minds. What kind of combination is this?" "Probably. I'm in you and you're in me. Then this should count." As Wang Lu spoke, he suddenly grabbed one of his master's hands, and then reached over to put a slender finger in his mouth. In that instant Wang Wu's body trembled, as if a distant memory was about to be awakened. However, at that moment, a vast and enormous aura appeared in the sky, instantly stealing the two's attention. The heaven had arrived. Chapter 568. Before this, Wang Lu never thought that in this immortal dreamland, he would have the opportunity to face the heaven. According to the ancient records of the Temple of Heaven, mortals would never have the chance to see the heaven in their lifetime. The child bestowing ceremony did establish a connection with the heaven, but this connection channel was actually very small. For the inhabitants of the heavenly earth, if they wanted to face the infinite power of the heaven, apart from asking the heaven, which had not been used for thousands of years, they could only look forward to success in cultivation and ascend to immortality. In other words, it was almost impossible for the heaven to come down. At least, it would never really invite the heaven to come down to the mortal world just because of the child bestowing ceremony. However, in front of the fact, no matter how many impossibilities there were, it was meaningless. The huge pressure on top of his head caused Wang Lu's jade mansion to shake and his primordial spirit to be in a trance. Just the sense of the existence of the heaven was like a substance oppressing him, making him unable to move. Under the suppression of the heaven, all the reverie vanished. Even when his primordial spirit was in a trance, it was impossible to form any clear thoughts. The charming atmosphere from a moment ago was gone, and the power of the heaven shone in all directions. However, a moment later the huge pressure disappeared. Wang Lu's mind suddenly became clear, and then he spat out a mouthful of turbid air from his chest. However, he saw that there was a layer of pale golden light curtain above his head. His master raised one hand to the sky, and her two sword fingers bloomed with light, isolating the huge pressure outside. Non-phase sword defense. Wang Lu did not even have time to sigh with emotion. The onion sprout-like finger that he just put in his mouth at this time could actually proudly resist the heaven collapse. He immediately called out the sword of Mount Kuan and poured all his power into it, ready to fight. Although he did not understand the reason, the hostility from the heaven was undoubtedly clear. Such a huge pressure was by no means normal. As a member of the Plentiful City Management Committee, Wang Lu had seen a lot of supreme-level powerhouses over the years. Although he could not talk and laugh with them, he would never be shocked by their eyes. Because the reason was very simple. This thing pressure could be withdrawn and released at will. Otherwise, how could those supreme who stood at the peak of the immortal path go out? With their cultivation, if they didn't restrain their strength, they would cause landslides and the earth to crack wherever they went. As for the heaven in this immortal dreamland, Wang Lu did not think that it was more powerful than those peak supremes in 9 regions. At least it would not be this much stronger. Therefore, this huge pressure could only mean that the other party did not come with good intentions. Looks like my speculation is correct. Impersonation is just a gimmick. The so-called firmament is just a cultivator with an extremely high cultivation base and patience. Wang Wu said, "Humph, I never believed in heaven from the beginning. How could a group of self-proclaimed Dixian people create heaven in the immortal dreamland? What a joke." Wang Lu nodded lightly. "This belated statement is pretty good. You still have the nerve to make sarcastic remarks behind my back?" Wang Wu angrily glared at him. "I think this change is mostly your fault." Wang Lu declined to comment. After a moment of silence, he gave his master a wink. Wang Wu smiled and opened a tiny gap in her non-phase sword defense. A gray sword chi rushed out from the gap and went straight to the sky. That was Wang Lu's all-out primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi. After accumulating power for a long time, coupled with the guidance and amplification of the sword of Mount Kuan, the power of this sword strike had far exceeded the King Pill stage. However, the sword chi dragon only wandered in the air for a breath of time before it was crushed into powder by an even more powerful force. However, Wang Lu was not discouraged. With his Jindan stage cultivation, being able to last for a breath of time in front of the heaven was already something that he could be proud of. Not to mention that his sword strike was originally just a greeting. "This is the first time we meet, yet you're already so hostile. Dare I ask the heaven, what is the reason for this?" After the sword chi dragon shot out, Wang Lu let out a loud and clear roar. A moment later, there was a rumbling sound of thunder in the sky, which was the answer given by the heaven. Being able to directly talk to the other party, the purpose of his sword strike had been achieved. However, when Wang Lu heard this, he couldn't help but gawk. "Men, none of them are good. What kind of words is this? Well, it's not that incomprehensible. In this immortal dreamland, men were set as the chaotic species of the lower realm, which could be called the source of all ugliness and disasters. And the heavenly earth's heaven was the creator of this pure land of women, so naturally, it was full of discrimination against the chaotic species of the lower realm. However, when it opened its mouth, it actually said such a sentence, which was really shocking. But then he heard Wang Wu nod and say, "These words are deep in my heart. Men are indeed not good." Wang Lu was ready to refute this sexist point of view, but then he saw his master winking at him, seemingly implying something. Based on decades of plus Ouyang Shang's life, and nearly 100 years of tacit understanding with each other, Wang Lu instantly understood her intention. When the heaven came, it couldn't be resisted. Wang Wu's non-phase sword defense could block it for a while, but it couldn't block it forever. And the root of the problem was obviously the word man. This cultivator, who was regarded as the heaven, hated all men in the world to the extreme. Wang Lu opened the child bestowing ceremony as a man, which was like hitting the muzzle of a gun. But on the other hand, what if Wang Lu was not a man? For example, if the stellar fairy Wang Lulu was here, would the heaven still come in anger? While Wang Lu was silent, Wang Wu continued to try to give him a hint. She silently gestured with her other free hand. "Quickly cut it, it's not too late." Wang Lu gave her a middle finger and also made the same gesture. "Cut your ass." Wang Wu was also anxious and directly said, "Can you at least think about me? Right now, I'm supporting the non-phase sword defense against the heaven. I can't hold it for long. It's fine if you don't care about your own face, but do you want to put me in danger for your own little organ?" Wang Lu was also anxious. "How dare you slander the spear of death as a little organ?" Wang Wu sneered and no longer paid him any attention. She turned her head and shouted at the heaven, "Hey, at least I'm innocent. She's a real cute girl, okay? Later, I'll release my sword defense, and you can crush him to death. Please let me go." As a result, the next moment, the heaven directly struck Wang Wu's head, and the pale golden sword defense shook for a while. Wang Wu looked up at the sky in disbelief. "What the hell, why did you hit me?" The heaven responded with a thunderous voice, "A woman who falls in love with a man also deserves to die." Ha 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 ha. Wang Lu suddenly laughed wildly. Seeing countless thunder snakes moving in the sky, after laughing, Wang Lu immediately argued loudly, "The love between a man and a woman is not a sin, heaven. You must have misunderstood." The thunder continued to roll. There are indeed many scum in the world, and the love between a man and a woman often leads people to go to extremes and into depravity. But nothing is absolute. Are there no scum among women? Is the love between a woman and a woman pure and dirty? Even in this paradise, blessed by the heaven and carefully selected descendants of the human immortals, there are still all kinds of sins. It can be seen that gender discrimination and even misophobia are not desirable. What's more, the love between a man and a woman is too numerous to mention. If you don't believe me, I can tell you the story of the ancient sword. Strange story. Before he finished speaking, an unprecedentedly fierce thunder struck toward Wang Lu. Wang Lu very keenly predicted this attack, and stood next to Wang Wu in advance to divert the trouble. Wang Wu took the attack with great difficulty. After blocking the thunder, she shouted at the top of her lungs, "Heaven, please investigate. I definitely didn't fall in love with him. I like women." But before she finished speaking, because of the trembling of her body, a crystal that she had just put away rolled out of her arms and onto the ground. As the crystal rolled, it was stimulated by the surging magic power and instantly shook. Then it released images and sounds. A pair of naked man and woman were having sex crazily. The scene was in full swing. At that moment, Wang Lu and Wang Wu stared at the crystal on the ground in shock, not knowing what to say. The so-called "heaven wants me dead" was probably referring to the current situation. For a moment, the world was silent, and only the moans of the man and woman in the crystal could be heard. Shameless! Boom! The next moment, the thunder from the sky became twice as thick, hitting Wang Wu's right hand that was supporting the sword defense until it became numb. But after the situation became 100 times more serious, Wang Wu seemed to be much calmer. She raised her left hand to stabilize the sword defense and said to Wang Lu, "After so much acting, how's the analysis going?" After the arrival of heaven, most of the discrimination between the master and disciple was deliberate acting. Of course, there was also a small part where they were scolding each other with their true feelings. They wanted to create all kinds of extreme situations to observe each other's reactions. Wang Wu needed to use all her strength to maintain the sword defense, so the responsibility of analysis fell on Wang Lu's shoulders. Wang Lu nodded and sneered. The so-called heaven is just a stubborn little girl with a low EQ. She's just a little stronger, but she's only at the level of a normal Dixian. There's nothing great about her. Can you not be so condescending when you're at the level of a normal Dixian? It makes people think that your level is very high. Humph, at least compared to Zhong Shengming, this guy is still far behind. Thinking of the battle of wits and courage with the sword demon in the ancient sword tomb, this so-called heaven really didn't know what to say. I've probably seen some clues. Is it the divine thunder from the sky? No problem, I'll help you. Let's do it together. Wang Lu said, took a few steps forward, went behind Wang Wu, and then gently hugged her. This ambiguous action at this time seemed very solemn, because at the same time, there were two king pills echoing each other. Wang Wu felt a warm force pouring into her jade mansion, and her non-phase sword defense, which was on the verge of a crisis, suddenly received a powerful support. Wang Lu's strength alone was insignificant in front of the divine thunder from the sky. However, that king pill was, after all, the top-quality king pill in the world. When it fell into the hands of Wang Wu, the room for it to play was too big. The difference between the 110th layer cultivation method and Wang Lu's 60 to 70 layer cultivation method was really like the difference between heaven and earth. Fusion was power. Chapter 569. Tens of thousands of lightning bolts fell, forming a golden light curtain. In the midst of the violent sea of lightning that cleared the field, the pale golden sword defense became firm and then gradually rose up. The lightning from the sky was still dense and heavy, but it could no longer approach the two people inside the sword defense. In the face of the most powerful enemy in the immortal dreamland, this pair of non-phase master and disciple actually withstood it. The power of the combination tactic was stronger than expected. After Wang Lu gave his king pill to his master, the defensive power of the non-phase sword defense more than doubled. It seemed that for the 110th layer of non-phase method, the increase in power had reached the point of nonlinearity. Unfortunately, due to the limitation of her spirit root, she was unable to break through the king pill. If she had Yuanying stage or even deity stage cultivation base, coupled with this kind of heaven-defying defensive method, perhaps even the heavenly tribulation would not be in her eyes. After inheriting the legacy of Ouyang Shang, she had painstakingly created this heaven-defying method for more than 100 years. Its mysteriousness was so profound that it made people sigh with emotion. Wang Lu and his master hugged each other tightly, so he could clearly sense the way she controlled her magical power. His biggest experience was, even though he didn't understand it, he felt that it was awesome. He had been cultivating non-phase method for more than 20 years, and that system was deeply engraved in the King Pill, which could be regarded as profound attainment. However, compared with his master's non-phase method, Wang Lu felt like a layman. Let alone using it as a reference, there were many parts that were even difficult for him to understand. For example, he didn't understand that Wang Wu had 2 King Pills, and there was a special skill in non-phase method to coordinate the operation of multiple King Pills. But unexpectedly at this time, after she incorporated his King Pill into her own system, she could control 3 King Pills at the same time without any difficulty. This was the accumulated gap of more than 100 years. Wang Wu's perception on the path of immortal cultivation was particularly amazing. Coupled with the legacy left to her by Ouyang Shang, perhaps no one in 9 regions could compare to her. And how could non-phase method, which she regarded as the foundation of immortal cultivation, be that simple? However, Wang Lu did not regret fusing the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi into the King Pill. Although non-phase method was good, it was, after all, other people's thing. Wang Wu had her own difficulties in using non-phase method as the core, but he did not necessarily want to completely follow her example. Moreover, when it came to aptitude and perception, he might not necessarily lose to her. After all, she was able to deduce her non-phase method to more than 110th layer, and she relied on the inheritance that he left for her. Time passed by bit, but the lightning that fell from the sky became more and more intense, yet the non-phase sword defense remained firm and unbreakable. In the process of merging with his master, Wang Lu's King Pill was controlled by his master. Although he didn't understand the principle of the 110th layer of non-phase method, his King Pill gradually changed under this kind of operation. The first was the expansion. Wang Wu relied on the cooperation of the 3 King Pills to support her sword defense, which was strengthened by the triangle that symbolized the most stable structure. However, in fact, there was a big difference between the 3 King Pills. Wang Wu's 2 King Pills were peak level. Whether it was the quality or the total amount of magical power, they were far superior to Wang Lu's middle-rank King Pill. Therefore, this triangle was not so stable in theory. However, as Wang Wu combined the 3 with her non-phase method and continued to circulate her true qi, Wang Lu could clearly feel that the 3 King Pills were rapidly averaging. Wang Wu's 2 King Pills began to shrink and dim, while his own King Pill rapidly expanded and shone brightly. In theory, in the path of immortal cultivation, there was no such thing as enlightenment. Thus, it was almost impossible for the predecessors to spoil the seedling through excessive enthusiasm. However, at this time, Wang Lu actually enjoyed the treatment of spoiling the seedling through excessive enthusiasm. Under the nourishment of Wang Wu's 2 King Pills, he was advancing toward the high-rank King Pill at an astonishing speed. Moreover, the process was actually smooth and steady. There was no instability in the foundation that was easy to occur when one's power skyrocketed. However, the price seemed to be a bit high. In just a short period of time, Wang Wu's King Pill had vaguely fallen from the peak level of King Pill. Wang Lu did not know whether this kind of decline in strength would cause permanent damage, but in any case, when one reached the peak level of King Pill, a small level often meant more than 10 years of bitter cultivation, let alone Wang Wu, whose spirit root was not good. "Master, you take it easy," Wang Wu said. "When the 3 King Pills are equalized, the non-phase sword defense can exert its strongest defensive power. Now, saving my life is the most important thing, so you've got it easy. Remember to give me compensation when we go back. At this time, you're still thinking about money? If you just give it to me, I don't have to think about it anymore. Okay, I'll give you 2 million spirit stones as medical and nutrition expenses. So you must hold on. Don't worry, I'm the #1 King Pill in 9 regions. Oh my God." Just as the two of them were halfway through their conversation, the heaven was impatient with this stalemate. An unprecedented purple-blue tribulation lightning fell down, causing Wang Lu and his disciple to lose their footing and almost fall to the side. "My goodness, it's starting to get serious. It's a bit more powerful than expected. While speaking, Wang Wu's mouth slightly overflowed with a hint of blood. The lightning strike just now was too fierce and had already injured her a bit. However, the more important problem was that the heaven's attack power was higher than expected, and so was its endurance. She originally thought that the 3-king pill equalization array could withstand it, but now it seemed that this might not be the case. Although she could further weaken herself and improve Wang Lu's strength to make the 3-king pill equalization array more balanced, her 2-king pill equalization array would be reduced. The gap between the peak king pill and the high-level king pill was not small. Once it fell, her comprehensive defense might not be able to improve. After thinking for a while, Wang Wu couldn't come up with a better way. This set of method to control the 3-king pill equalization array ignored the effect of elixirs. Moreover, she was extremely poor, so where could she get elixirs? As for weapons and equipment, it was even worse. She was all alone, with nothing but the emerald green bamboo sword. As for the sword of Mount Kuan in Wang Lu's hand, although she could borrow it, she was afraid that it couldn't withstand the collision of non-phase sword defense and the heaven's thunder. If Lu Li's Skybreaker was here, she could completely withstand it, but the side effect of the Skybreaker was something she couldn't bear. While hesitating, Wang Wu suddenly heard Wang Lu's voice. "Don't worry, wait a moment." The next moment, Wang Wu was surprised to find that among the 3-king pills, the one belonging to Wang Lu grew at an alarming rate. Moreover, it didn't rely on external support, but its own growth. "Wang Lu, what are you doing?" Wang Wu vaguely sensed that something was wrong and immediately asked through primordial spirit. "There's too much innate vitality, so I burned it a bit." "Bastard! Who told you to do that?" Wang Wu was simply angry. Burning innate vitality like the heaven-burning blood technique in exchange for a short period of time was downright evil. When she was young, it was fine to use it occasionally. Above the king pill stage, the effect that could be achieved by burning innate vitality alone was already very effective. And in order to achieve the desired effect, the innate vitality was often burned for decades or even hundreds of years. How long was the lifespan of a Taoist master of the king pill? Could it withstand such a burning? Even if Wang Lu was blessed and had a long life, he would still die young after being burned like this. Did she want to see him die early by working so hard to support the sword defense? Don't worry, the innate vitality is just a primer. It's only been burning for a year, mainly to stimulate the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi. Wang Lu explained unhurriedly. His king pill was a combination of non-phase method and primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi, but in the 3-king pill balanced array, the part that was really strengthened was the part that belonged to non-phase method. The primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi was almost equivalent to being suppressed. On the whole, the strengthening of the non-phase method was very beneficial, but for Wang Lu himself, this meant that the king pill was out of balance. Of course, this was not a big deal. Non-phase method was extremely tolerant and could completely tolerate this kind of imbalance. However, the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi might not necessarily be able to tolerate it. This inherited method from the ancient sword demon was particular about advancing forward and overwhelming everything. When Wang Lu first integrated it into the king pill to coexist with his non-phase method, it took him a lot of twists and turns. Now that his non-phase method was powerful, the primal chaos sword chi was even more eager to give it a try. And now Wang Lu was ready to stimulate the vitality of the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi. If it was done well, he could take this opportunity to push his king pill to the high grade or even the peak of the king pill in one fell swoop. Although the risk was not small, once he failed, it was likely to cause the king pill to shatter. Moreover, as a result, there would definitely be many problems such as the instability of the foundation, the backwardness of other methods, and so on. However, he couldn't care so much. The further expansion of the king pill only took a few breaths of time. Under the stimulation of the burning innate vitality, the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi in the king pill completely broke out its fierceness. It crazily expanded to overwhelm the other half of the non-phase method in the king pill. In an instant, it was as if there was an extra living thing in the king pill. Many cultivators once said that the immortal level method itself was like a life. When Wang Lu's cultivation base was still shallow, he didn't realize it, but now, he gradually realized it. And along with the rapid growth of the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi, the grade of Wang Lu's king pill also rose. From the high-grade king pill, It suddenly jumped up a notch and stepped on the edge of the peak of the king pill. From the middle-grade king pill to the peak, Wang Lu only took a total of 2 hours. Such a chance would probably be hard to come by again. However, Wang Lu didn't have time to sigh and immediately asked, "How is it, Xiao Wu, is it enough?" It's enough." Wang Wu softly agreed, but she seemed a bit absent-minded. "Hey, isn't it not good to be absent-minded at this time?" Wang Wu, of course, knew that it was not good to be absent-minded at this time. At present, her 3 king pills were all maintained at the peak, and the defensive power of her non-phase sword defense could be raised to an unprecedented level. Moreover, after that heavy blow from the heaven's thunder, there was a faint sign of an arrow at the end of its flight. This was undoubtedly a good time to turn defense into offense, a good opportunity to decide the outcome of the battle. However, just now that kid Wang Lu's words made her unable to ignore it. "How is it, Xiao Wu? Who allowed him to call her that?" Wang Wu, of course, didn't care about the seniority. Usually, when they quarreled on the non-phase peak, Wang Lu often called her a poor slut, but she didn't care. However, just now his tone seemed familiar. She didn't know why she had such a feeling. As early as 100 years ago, she gave up all her illusions and never allowed herself to be weak enough to hope for those unrealistic things. When this kid Wang Lu first came to the mountain, some people did mention that some of his characteristics were similar to that person. However, she disdained it at that time. The past was already the past. He sacrificed himself not to make the future generations weak enough to only hope for the resurrection of the dead. The people who lived carried a heavy responsibility, which could not be casually thrown away. But now, feeling the strong arms and solid chest of the person behind her, she really couldn't hold back the hidden palpitation in her heart. "Hey, let me ask you something. Do you remember that you once made an agreement with me?" Wang Lu frowned. Is this woman crazy? At this time, if she doesn't hurry to reinforce her non-phase sword defense to cope with the increasingly powerful thunder bombardment, what's the use of asking these boring questions? Agreement? Of course, not long ago, before the heaven-bestowing child ceremony began, I promised to give full play to the advantage of having a big tool and make you fall in love with me. However, just as Wang Lu was about to open his mouth, he was suddenly shocked to find that the woman in his arms had become unprecedentedly weak. Although he had long realized that his master as a woman was actually quite beautiful, different from the otaku more than 100 years ago who was wholeheartedly immersed in cultivation, the current Wang Wu, if she didn't open her mouth, was a beautiful woman with a graceful figure, slender where it should be slender, and plump where it should be plump. However, she was, after all, a sword cultivator. In battle, her body was stronger than steel, so she would never feel weak. In an instant, Wang Lu seemed to realize something, so he could no longer suppress his palpitation, which drove him to speak softly. "I once promised someone that I would come back." "It's really you?" Wang Wu suddenly turned around. Her eyes were full of incredulity, as well as indescribable happiness. However, at this time Wang Lu was horrified, because at the same time, the pale golden sword light above his head swayed and then unexpectedly collapsed. Under the shock, Wang Wu actually lost control of her sword defense. However, the heaven would not let go of this opportunity. A black lightning fell straight down and went straight to the top of his head. In an instant, Wang Lu felt that all the hair on his body stood up uncontrollably. At the same time, feeling the oppression of this destructive force, Wang Wu angrily roared, "Don't get in the way." A golden sword light bloomed from her fingertips, and the non-phase sword defense pushed by the 3 king pills was launched. However, it was still a step too late. After a loud bang, the lightning column dissipated, and wildfire bloomed everywhere. However, the dark clouds that brewed the lightning gradually faded away. Obviously, the heaven was exhausted and could not continue. However, at the same time, Wang Wu also slumped down, and blood slowly overflowed from her 7 orifices. In her jade mansion, the 2 king pills shattered on the spot. A cultivator who was known for her perfect defense and had never been careless, eventually suffered a heavy blow because of a moment of carelessness. The power of the lightning just now was comparable to the full power strike of a supreme-level cultivator. Even if Wang Wu was in her best condition, she still had to prepare for a long time to deal with it, let alone the hasty sword defense. When the non-phase sword defense was shattered, She also deliberately used her 2 king pills to cover Wang Lu, so that the latter was not hurt at all. Her reaction in that split second was perfect. It was just that she could not hold on anymore. Wang Lu took a deep breath and tightly hugged the person in his arms. The king pill that had just returned to his control crazily operated, squeezing out every bit of its potential and turning it into life force that poured into her body, trying to repair her injury and re-glue the king pill. Of course, if she wanted to recast it after it was broken, it was just a fantasy. Especially under this kind of violent destruction, the broken core was almost equivalent to the death of a cultivator. But how could Wang Lu let her die? Even if he exhausted all possibilities, even if he knew that everything might be futile, he would never hesitate. Seeing that the breath of the woman in his arms was getting weaker and weaker, Wang Lu's arms unconsciously tightened. Don't sleep. You promised me that you can hold on. If I can fulfill my promise, why can't you as a master do it? At the same time, his innate vitality burned again. Although all the theories he learned from the Tong Cloud Hall told him that it was meaningless to burn his innate vitality at this time, Wang Lu would rather gamble on that 1 in 10,000 chance of a miracle. If he burned enough at once, perhaps the quantitative change would lead to a qualitative change. At this time, the woman in his arms gently opened her eyes, tremblingly stretched out her hand, and put her cold fingertips on Wang Lu's arm. Stop first, listen to me. As soon as she finished speaking, Wang Lu felt that his king pill was out of control again. Even the burning of his innate vitality was forcibly stopped and extinguished. Looking into the woman's eyes, Wang Lu felt a sense of emptiness. All of his impulsive thoughts were expelled, and his thoughts became clear and calm. Actually, I had imagined that he would come back, come to me on a rainbow cloud, and tell me that I did well. But people can't rely on fantasies to live. I knew that he was already dead, and people can't come back to life after death. Life is that precious, otherwise who would cherish it? But I never thought that you would actually do it. Wang Wu tried to smile, but it seemed to have affected her injury. She frowned slightly and couldn't say anything else. Wang Lu immediately injected magical power into her. What surprised him was that her weak breath of life seemed to have recovered a little under the infusion of magical power. This was probably the magical effect of the 9 regions number 1 king pill, which had been tempered hundreds and thousands of times. If it were someone else, not to mention the king pill, even a deity-stage Taoist master would have been turned into ashes. Wang Lu was surprised and happy at the same time. He continued to pour his magical power into her without reservation. Although the effect was small, it was still somewhat effective. The woman struggled uneasily in his arms. She opened her mouth to say something, but Wang Lu covered it with his hand. Don't talk. I didn't burn my innate vitality, I just poured some magical power. At most, the king pill will drop by 1 or 2 levels. This is something that I obtained through a fortuitous encounter, so there's no need to feel sorry for it. Wang Wu struggled for a while, but she couldn't resist Wang Lu's generous reward, so she had nothing to say. At this time, the sky above them suddenly buzzed again. Wang Lu was frightened. Is the battle not over yet? Whatever. If they want to come, then come. In any case, the opposite party is like an arrow at the end of its flight and doesn't have any killer move. I'll just have to rely on my body to resist a few waves. However, the next moment he saw an unexpected scene. A young human figure, illuminated by the light beam, fell from the sky and slowly landed beside him. When that small body touched the black soil, it immediately let out a passionate cry. Baby! Wang Lu was stunned. How could a baby appear at this time? Could it be a child bestowed by the heaven? What the hell? Just now they had just fought a life and death battle, but now a child inexplicably appeared. Was the heaven blind? But soon Wang Lu found that the back of the baby not far away from him was red, and the cry also quickly weakened. He froze for a moment and then he understood. This was the fire poison. Just now, when the black thunderbolt fell from the sky and was dispersed by the non-phase sword defense, the dispersed energy spread around, turning the ground under their feet into scorched earth. For Taoist Master King Pill, the scorched earth containing the fire poison was insignificant, but for the newborn little life, it was a deadly poison. Of course, it was not difficult to save him. As long as Wang Lu could spare a hand to help him get rid of the fire poison, it would be enough. But the problem was, he had a more important person to save, and this process could not allow him to be distracted. An inexplicable child bestowed by the heaven, and a woman who had been with him for decades, involving 2 generations of love, which was more important, even if he thought with his knee, he would know. Therefore, after taking a glance at the child, Wang Lu took back his gaze and completely ignored it. He put all his attention on the person in his arms. His decision was clean and neat. But at this time, a faint sigh suddenly came from the sky. To save the adult or to save the child? I can't believe there is a man in the world who would choose to save the adult. Perhaps the men in the world are not all without redeeming qualities. While speaking, the clouds in the sky completely dissipated, and the sun shone. The earth was full of vitality, and the scorched earth was overgrown with flowers and plants. In a moment it was a sea of life. Chapter 570. After the sun shone, heaven's suppressive force gradually dissipated and the aggressive heaven's descent came to an abrupt end. This sudden change caught everyone off guard. Wang Lu used a great deal of willpower to suppress his curiosity. He did not look at the flowers and trees growing wildly around him, nor did he pay attention to the newborn baby who had just escaped from death. He did not even think about what was going on with the idiotic question of saving the adult or the child. He focused all his energy on his master and did not hesitate to give her life force. That heaven was obviously a retard, but retards also had their own benefits. This round of release of vitality without any reason had also benefited the seriously injured Wang Wu a lot. Her cheeks had already turned rosy, and she should be out of danger. However, Wang Lu did not dare to be careless. What if this was the last radiance of a setting sun? What if it was her period? Therefore, he continued to pour his mana into her body. However, after a while, he felt a sudden resistance coming from his master's body. Although it was not strong, it formed a wall with great skill and blocked the mana that Wang Lu poured into her body. This change was even more shocking than heaven saving the adult or the child. What did this resistance from his master's body mean? Could it be that she had already given up? Hey, don't give up on your treatment. You promised me that you would try your best to live no matter what. Wang Wu coughed and coughed out a mouthful of blood. She looked like she was in great pain. She did not answer and only looked at Wang Lu with a complicated gaze. However, the resistance in her body was getting stronger. At the same time, Wang Lu could clearly sense that the 2 broken king pills were losing their energy rapidly. In a few breaths, the full king pill's energy was completely gone and the king pill's fragments disappeared. In an instant, Wang Wu degenerated from a heavily injured king pill cultivator to an ordinary person without any cultivation. You? He never thought that Wang Wu would be so ruthless. Wang Lu was furious. Do you want to die that badly? Damn it, I worked so hard to extend your life and you do this to me? Sure, you can die if you want, but let me enjoy myself before you die. Wang Lu was treating a dead horse like a living one. As he cursed, he simply undid Wang Wu's clothes. Anyway, he didn't know what to do in the current situation, so he might as well use his ultimate move and wait for a miracle. However, as soon as his right hand touched her clothes, Wang Wu suddenly grabbed it. You have a weak will to survive, but you're trying very hard to keep your chastity. Wang Lu gritted his teeth. Did you lose your poor IQ after the serious injury? What a perverse act. As soon as he finished speaking, he heard Wang Wu say angrily, "You're the one who's going against the law." Your voice is full of energy. Wait, what's that in your body? At this time Wang Lu tightly hugged Wang Wu. He could clearly sense the changes in her body. His internal vision could even directly see the situation inside her jade mansion. He saw that above the ruins, dozens of golden dragons came from the void. After flying in the air with great momentum, they condensed into 2 golden balls. Then the golden balls compressed and shrank, transforming into 2 dazzling golden cores. After the king pill was formed, the jade mansion was swept away, and all kinds of simple and unadorned decorations appeared one after another, making it full of Dixian spirit. It was even more beautiful than the original Jade Mansion. What is this? At this time, no matter how hot-headed Wang Lu was, he could see that Wang Wu's life was no longer in danger. It could even be said that her condition was good, so there was no need for him to do anything. It was just that. What was the matter with these two king pills that suddenly appeared? Backup pills, Wang Wu lightly explained. Women always have a few backup pills. Wang Lu firmly believed that this was the first time he heard of such a thing as backup pills in this world. If it was anyone else who heard it, they would probably think that it was nonsense. But then again, before he met Wang Wu, when did he ever hear that there was a king pill cultivator in 9 regions who had the ability to withstand the heavenly thunder? Common sense was not applicable to Wang Wu. In short, you've already planned it from the beginning? That's right. I've long felt that the original 2 golden cores are no longer useful. After being equalized with your golden core, their purity has decreased a lot. Instead of wasting time repairing them, it's better to replace them with new ones. The only problem is that the process of replacing the pills is a bit troublesome. Especially after your external true qi comes in. It's simply troublesome. Before the Jade Mansion is cleaned, the new king pill can't enter. However, your external true qi is endless, so the Jade Mansion can't be cleaned at all. What's more hateful is that the 2 broken pills that were originally decided to be discarded, you still want to glue them back together. Do you want me to become a waste with 2 waste pills? Wang Wu said and then turned her head to glare at Wang Lu. I was almost killed by you. Wang Lu had nothing to say. After a long silence, he silently withdrew his arm from Wang Wu's waist. Since his debut, he had never done such a stupid thing. Although Wang Wu's pill replacement tactic was unimaginable, and could be said to have broken countless theorems in the immortal cultivation world of 9 regions, it was even more impossible for him to predict that she had such ability. At that time he did make the most rational choice. Well, when he was hot-headed it was actually not that rational. However, if he calmed down a bit, he could more or less see the clues from Wang Wu's reaction. But at that time, how could he calm down under those conditions? Were it not for the fact that he had never let go of his non-phase immortal heart, he would have already gone berserk at that time. However, no matter how many reasons he found, it was still a big joke. Therefore, Wang Lu had nothing to say. He could only cover his face and run away. However, as soon as he turned around, he felt warmth on his back. He was hugged by someone. While he was stunned, Wang Wu's voice came into his ear. Although there have been too many changes, you're still as stupid as before. Previously, when we were on the mountain, you always made this kind of problem. But I know you're confused because you care about me. Being hugged by her, Wang Lu's body was slightly stiff. He wanted to say something, but he felt that he had 1,000 things to say, and didn't know where to start. The relationship between him and the woman behind him was too subtle, which made him not know how to deal with it. Thinking about it, it was the same for Wang Wu. Being hugged by her tightly, Wang Lu could even hear her increasingly rapid heartbeat. It was quiet all around, but the atmosphere became more and more ambiguous in the silence. Wang Lu stood quietly, but his heart was getting more and more confused. And at this moment, suddenly, a cry came from the dense grass not far away. The cry broke the silence, and also broke the two's reverie. Wang Wu took the opportunity to withdraw her hand, and rushed to the source of the sound in a few steps. She looked down and clicked her tongue. It was that baby. Looking at the baby, Wang Lu also felt a headache. The child bestowment ceremony was originally used as a test to communicate with heaven, and the bestowment of children was never taken seriously from the beginning. How could it be so easy to satisfy these 2 conditions? They had to be truly in love and have intimate behavior. At least, Wang Lu estimated that it might be possible to communicate with heaven, but to get it to recognize their relationship and bestow a child was a joke. In the end, the child bestowment ceremony went through many twists and turns, and the original goal could be said to have been achieved 10 times or even 100 times more than it should have. Heaven's background was more or less figured out, but what was initially thought to be a joke actually became a reality. What should we do? Wang Lu pondered for a while and decided to kick the ball to Wang Wu. Wang Wu was shocked by the baby, but she gradually returned to her usual quick-witted manner. She walked around the baby, thought about it, and suddenly walked up boldly to hug the baby. Wang Lu was shocked to see this. This baby was actually a huge problem. but he didn't expect Wang Wu to take the initiative to pick it up? Could it be that after 2 lifetimes of love, her maternal instinct suddenly broke out? This was completely unreasonable. Whether it was his previous life or this life, in his impression, Wang Wu was absolutely insulated from the word maternal instinct. She could be a genius cultivator, she could be a dedicated cultivator, and she could be a maverick who disregarded the secular world's view, but she could never be a good wife and loving mother. As a result, when Wang Lu was in deep disbelief, Wang Wu's finger had touched the baby. As a result, with a chi sound, the baby disappeared. The two of them were stunned, but soon Wang Lu reacted. It's impossible to create life from the void in the immortal dreamland. You can't create a real life. The so-called creation from the void, in other words, was an artificial life. Instead of going through the natural harmony of yin and yang, it was artificially synthesized by means of alchemy and refining. The creation from the void had troubled the immortal cultivation world for many years, and it had even been proved to be an impossible miracle. As for all the creatures in the group of immortal tombs, they were essentially just part of the immortal dreamland, and it was not an exaggeration to say that they were illusory things. In this immortal dreamland, the child-bestowing ritual was the combination of the characteristics of 2 illusory life forms by the heaven to create a new illusory life form. In any case, it naturally didn't matter in the immortal dreamland. However, Wang Wu and her disciple were genuine creatures, and did not have the characteristics of illusory things. Extracting the characteristics of the 2 of them to create a life form would only create a virtual image. Once it came into contact with a living thing, it would vanish. As for the other creatures, they could only live in the immortal dreamland and could not be brought out. Otherwise, when each cultivator entered the immortal dreamland, the group of immortal tombs would create a new world for them. No one knew how many high-level cultivators there were, and supreme-level cultivators were not uncommon. If they could walk out of the immortal dreamland at will, wouldn't 9 regions be in chaos? In any case, when the baby disappeared, Wang Lu was more or less relieved. However, when he turned around, he saw that Wang Wu was stunned on the spot. She looked lost, as if she was extremely lost by the disappearance of the baby. "Hey, you're not expecting anything, are you?" When Wang Lu spoke, he felt that his heartbeat was vaguely accelerated. However, after a long silence, Wang Wu just sighed and explained with a smile, "It's nothing. It's just that I was going to rely on the tactic of mother depending on the son to divide your inheritance. Now it seems that my dream has fallen through." Upon hearing this, Wang Lu felt that the familiar master had returned. The change in attitude was so fast that it caught him off guard. However, just as he thought of this, Wang Lu suddenly felt that something was wrong. "Wait a minute, did you just say that you want to rely on the tactic of mother depending on the son to divide my inheritance?" Just a slip of the tongue. It's just a show of true feelings. TSK, since you mentioned it, I remember it. Now that you've achieved success and recognition, it's time to return the inheritance that I gave you before. Don't even think about it. Wang Wu covered her chest with her hand. "This is already mine. You really have the nerve to say this." Wang Wu rolled her eyes and suddenly smiled. "That's right. I've received so many benefits from you for so many years. It's not right to say that I don't get anything back in return. Then I'll pay you some interest." The next moment, Wang Lu suddenly felt a fragrant breeze in front of him. The woman's figure was already in front of him. Her beautiful eyes were moving, and there was a charm in her pretty face. A light touch on his lips was like morning dew, clear, sweet, and refreshing. Next to his ear, Wang Wu's voice was faintly discernible, but it was like the morning bell and evening drum that stirred his heart. "Sorry, although it's not my first kiss, my technique is still a bit lacking. So if you don't like it, forget it." Chapter 571. The fresh fragrance that gradually rippled between his lips left him with an endless aftertaste. Wang Lu gently touched his lips and subconsciously smiled. Almost the same lines, the same touch, made the memory of the 2 lives intertwined at this moment. And the figure of the beauty in front of him became blurred. In a trance, he seemed to see the junior sister who was crying in his arms and full of fear for the future. His heart surged with an endless desire to protect her, wanting to protect her safety at all costs. However, when he came back to his senses, the woman in white was already standing on the top of a hill with a newly plucked bamboo branch on her waist. Facing the setting sun, she stretched her infinitely beautiful body. The setting sun pulled out a long shadow, which was long and narrow. Even the shadow of the mountain under her feet extended all the way to him. Looking up, Wang Wu seemed to be high in the clouds, in the fiery sunset glow. After more than 100 years, the delicate and timid junior sister had grown into the fifth elder of the Lingjian school, the #1 king pill in 9 regions. Even his cultivation in this life had started because of her. Things remain the same, but people have changed. As for me, I am no longer the same person as before. On the top of the hill, the voice of Wang Wu clearly passed into his ears. I still remember that time in the Savage Land you wanted me to live happily no matter what, 100 years, 200 years. Then you promised that I would come back. Later on, you really did it, but nearly 150 years have passed. How many 150 years can a person have in his life? Of course, I don't blame you for coming too late. I just want to say that everything is different. Of course, Wang Lu knew that everything was different, but he also knew that what Wang Wu wanted to say was not what she meant. At that time, I once asked you why you chose me. You said a lot, but I won't say those nice things. However, I remember very clearly that you once said that my biggest problem was that I lacked a sense of responsibility, because I wasn't interested in anything around me and I didn't care about anything. But at that time, with my mixed spirit root, I had to do my best to keep up with the progress of my senior brothers and sisters, so how could I have time to think about other things? Later on, you gave me your inheritance, which made me enlightened, greatly improved my perception, and also improved my spirit root. Only then could I really open my eyes just like now. With that, Wang Wu pointed her foot and her figure soared into the sky like an arrow, leaving the mountains behind her. After an unknown period of time, Wang Lu could no longer see her with the vision of Taoist Master King Pill. In 9 regions there was a strong wind in the sky. The higher one went, the stronger the wind, like an indestructible barrier. It was said that even true immortals could not resist the fierceness of the wind at the highest place. Of course, Wang Wu was far less than a true immortal, but the scenery that she could appreciate must be far better than most people. Senior brother, guess what I'm looking at right now? Wang Lu was silent for a while and did not answer. Of course, his vision at this time was not as good as that of the #1 king pill in 9 regions. However, he was the biggest witness of the crisis that nearly destroyed the Lingjian school 150 years ago. No one knew the crisis of the fallen immortal better than him. However, the more he knew it, the heavier it was. 150 years ago, it was you, senior brother, who supported the situation. Although you were just a small Taoist Master King Pill at that time, you led the situation with your own strength and temporarily resolved a big crisis that might spread to the whole 9 regions. In the past 150 years, I have seen all the heroes in 9 regions, but no one can compare to you. I have taken over your legacy, inherited your inheritance, and also have your responsibility. I don't know how far I can go in the big wave in the future with my ability, but senior brother, please believe me, in the past 150 years, junior sister really didn't slack off. Wang Lu thought about her daily scenes on Non-Phase Peak, and felt that it was really difficult to accept the conclusion that she had never slacked off. However, considering that she was, after all, a woman, if he just turned a blind eye, then let it be for the time being. Moreover, from another point of view, she had really done an excellent job. Among the several elders of Heavenly Sword Hall, although her stage was the lowest, her actual combat ability was firmly in the forefront. In the whole 9 regions, she could be said to be one of the few experts. What was the concept of this? Those at the same level as her were at least peak deity stage or even supreme of unity stage. Those who could reach deity stage or even unity stage were basically the geniuses of the present age with excellent perception and aptitude. And almost all of those guys had been cultivating for less than 500 years. How long had Wang Wu been cultivating for? Not even half of them. Of course, Feng Yin and the others were not simple either. At the beginning, they each inherited the legacy of the Golden Generation. In less than 200 years of cultivation, they became the top experts in 9 regions, which could be called as a world-shaking achievement. At the beginning, the reason why Lingjian School was able to maintain its reputation as one of the 5 uniques in times of crisis was that it relied on the peerless method of suppressing the fallen immortals in the savage land. But now, the Lingjian school had a very high prestige solely by virtue of the Heavenly Sword Hall brand. Everyone didn't waste time thinking about it. Wang Lu could only smile bitterly when he looked at himself, who had just touched the peak of the king pill and whose foundation was unstable. More than 100 years is indeed a long time. So, senior brother, what are you going to do? With that, Wang Wu's figure flashed and returned to Wang Lu's side. She looked at him curiously, looking forward to his answer. Wang Lu was silent for a while and then sighed. From now on, don't call me senior brother. Being your senior brother ended 150 years ago. And more than 20 years ago, I did the ceremony of acknowledging you as my master. Wang Wu was not surprised by this answer. In her impression, although her big brother's mouth was a bit vicious and his character was occasionally jumpy, after experiencing a reincarnation, he had changed quite a bit from the past. However, one thing had never changed. He knew when to advance and when to retreat. Of course, it was a bit hard to describe him as knowing when to advance and when to retreat. However, her big brother was indeed very proper when it came to treating his own people. Yes, he was the big brother of the golden generation, the savior of all the survivors, and the person who made the greatest contribution in that peerless meritorious service. However, more than 100 years had passed. If the identity of the reincarnation of the big brother was revealed, what would Feng Yin and the others do? At that time, it would simply be an unsolvable problem. Hand over the position of the sect master? Not to mention the fact that the Lingjian school had been built from the dying day to today. It contained a lot of effort from the 10 people of Heavenly Sword Hall. Not to mention the sect master of one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. Giving it to a cultivator with the king pill would cause a huge sensation and put a lot of pressure on the sect. From Wang Lu's own point of view, he did not think that taking over the position of sect master was a good thing. He was still in the period where his cultivation was rising the fastest. It was best for him to focus on cultivation and experience without any distractions. Then, what if he did not mention the position of sect master, and only promoted Wang Lu to an elder of Heavenly Sword Hall and enjoyed a high status? That was still not feasible. At that time, when the Heavenly Sword Hall meeting was held, with just one word from Wang Lu, who would dare to openly oppose him? That power would not be inferior to that of the sect master. And if they turned a blind eye to Wang Lu and still let him be their lead disciple, when they met in the sect, Wang Lu would greet them as a disciple. Except for Wang Wu, whose worldview was different from ordinary people, who would dare to accept it? Who would really dare to see him as a disciple? In his previous life, the prestige of the eldest senior brother was actually an extremely cumbersome thing. It was better not to have it, so Wang Lu did not intend to expose it. Wang Wu said, but in fact I can't hide it for long. Everyone will find out sooner or later. After coming back from the demon realm this time, your temperament is becoming more and more similar to the past. It doesn't matter. As long as I don't say it, they won't be able to confirm it, and they won't take the initiative to confirm it. And the root of the problem is that my strength and prestige are not enough, and I am not worthy of the title of eldest senior brother. But the gap between me and you is actually only 100 years. With my accumulation in this life, once I explode with qi, catching up to you is just a matter of minutes. As soon as Wang Lu finished speaking, he unconsciously shrugged. Because if this kind of words were heard by Wang Wu, she would almost certainly retort, how could a cultivator with void spirit root who has cultivated for more than 20 years to reach the king pill stage have the face to explode with qi? In the past few years, she had quarreled with similar topics on the non-phase peak countless times. But this time, Wang Wu gently nodded her head. Yes, I look forward to it. Wang Wu's back was facing him, so that people could not see her face. However, Wang Lu always felt that her so-called expectation seemed to not only refer to his rapid advancement in cultivation base, but also that he could become the omnipotent eldest senior brother again. And then thinking of that, Wang Lu could not help but feel confused. After that, there was no word for a long time. Both of them had too many problems to think about. For example, for Wang Lu, he faintly felt that when Ouyang Shang traveled through the endless void twice, it was not just for survival. At least after the second time traveling and returning to 9 regions, The qualification of void spirit root was not a coincidence. Unfortunately, the memory belonging to Ouyang Shang was not completely inherited. It seemed that it was an inevitable loss in the process of traveling. So many things could only be guessed. At present, according to Wang Lu's view, it was likely to be related to the providence. He still remembered that Mr. Feng Yu seemed to have said that the providence of 9 regions was a joke to him. At that time, the Golden Generation obviously had deep providence, and it was reasonable to say that each of them was an expert who jumped off the cliff to pick up the secret books. However, in that crisis they were almost killed and injured. On the contrary, people like Wang Wu, who had bad providence, survived until the end. The reason for this was obviously not simple. Unfortunately, it was still not clear. But it didn't matter. With his King Pill stage cultivation base, it was useless to figure it out. If he really wanted to be the opponent of the fallen immortal, according to the current immortal cultivation route, he would not be able to reach deity stage. After no one knew how long, Wang Lu broke the silence. We have already sighed with emotion. Next, let's break through this immortal dreamland. Chapter 572. If it weren't for the quality of a professional adventurer that made Wang Lu regain his calmness in time, he almost forgot what the current main task was. Recognizing his lover in his previous life and his master in this life was only a side task. Although the weight of this side task was so heavy that in his opinion, even 10 main tasks could not compare to it. But now that he was in the immortal dreamland, there must be a beginning and an end. Moreover, the next thing to do was actually very simple. Ask the Heaven. Ask the Heaven was the route that Wang Wu strongly advocated and persisted in to the end. Previously, Wang Lu had asked her several times, but he failed to change her decision, so he no longer persuaded her. For the time being, he believed that she had the ability. Although Wang Lu did not know what she was so sure about, she would never harm him, right? Of course, this problem was even less of a problem now. By passing the test of protecting the big or the small, Wang Lu had successfully won the favor of the Heaven. The next time they met, it was likely to usher in an excellent start. According to the records of the Temple of Heaven, for thousands of years, the Heaven had never shown its personification part, but now it made an exception for Wang Lu. What did this mean? This meant that it was likely that the position of Wang Lu in the mind of the Heaven had been higher than that of the Temple of Heaven, which had been passed down for thousands of years. This was not incredible. For the brainless Heaven, such logic was normal. After determining the target, the two no longer wasted time and directly returned to the stronghold to recuperate, ready to find an opportunity to capture a Shintian level nun. After returning to the stronghold, the two of them attracted a lot of attention. Of course, the focus of attention was not on the relationship between the two. This pair of non-phase master and disciple were both good at acting. A moment ago, they were still affectionate and sweet, but when they returned to the stronghold in front of the people, they resumed their previous attitude of mutual disgust and contempt, making people completely unable to see that the relationship between the two had undergone some qualitative changes. The reason for the attention was that they obviously carried the breath of war after a great battle, and Wang Lu impressively jumped from the middle grade of King Pill all the way to the peak of King Pill. In just half a day, he advanced by leaps and bounds, which made Zhu Shiyao, who had always been indifferent to interpersonal relationships, could not help but come over. How did you do it? As she said that, this big sister of Spirit Sword Sect unconsciously put her hand on the hilt of the sword on her waist, as if she could hurt someone at any time. Wang Lu didn't mind. After several contacts with her, he knew that this person's character was just like this. Except for cultivation, she didn't care about anything else. Her degree of concentration was something that even Luli couldn't compare with. At least little Luli had a special liking for food. Moreover, under the training of her master, she was quite polite. But Zhu Shiyao couldn't do it at all. Although Feng Yin taught her how to conduct herself, she couldn't even be bothered to remember it. She felt that it was a waste of time, and it only got worse after she got the King Pill. It was said that the most exaggerated time was when she was cultivating on the mountain. By chance, she heard that the second elder, Lu Xian, had mastered the flying sword technique. Thereupon, she directly flew to the misty peak, pushed open the door of Lucien's room, and then, facing the inexplicably surprised Lucien, she stabbed him with her sword. The result was, of course, she was subdued by Lucien's sword. When Lucien, who didn't know whether to laugh or cry, asked her, she stuttered, "I want to see the flying sword technique." Later, of course, it was Feng Daoist master who personally came to apologize and then went back to teach her a lesson. Later on, it was said that Zhu Shiyao's condition had greatly improved, but now it seemed that it was just treating the symptoms but not the root cause. Because Wang Lu felt that Zhu Shiyao might slash him with her sword at any time to personally experience the fierceness of his new peak of King Pill. Alas, it's a long story. If you want to fight, wait until we get back. I'll accompany you to fight to your heart's content. It's a deal. Zhu Shiyao's eyes were literally shining, and even her speech was a lot smoother. Wang Lu shook his head. Inwardly, he only felt that it was interesting. This Zhu Shiyao was really a weirdo. In the past, there were more than 100 people in the golden generation of Spirit Sword sect, which could be said to be a gathering of elites, but none of them were as maverick as her. Moreover, in terms of talent and aptitude, Zhu Shiyao's potential in the path of cultivation was even stronger than that of Ouyang Shang. She could almost be said to be the #1 person in 9 regions. He didn't know from which corner of the world Feng Yin dug her out. Previously, for a long time, whenever Wang Lu faced Zhu Shiyao, he felt quite pressured. Among the cultivators of the same generation, there was only Zhu Shiyao whom he didn't have the absolute confidence to win. Even when he had some fortuitous encounter and his strength had advanced by leaps and bounds, when he turned his head to look, Zhu Shiyao was not far behind him, even close at hand. Considering the unpredictable stellar divine eyes, unless there was a crushing advantage in terms of absolute strength, who would dare to say that they would be able to defeat her? However, that was all in the past. After experiencing time travel and retrieving his previous life, Wang Lu's vision was completely different. He could look at his peers from a higher position. Not to mention that no matter how strong Zhu Shiyao was at this time, she was only a low-level King Pill. If they really fought, she was definitely not the opponent of the peak-level King Pill. Therefore, when he said to go back and fight to his heart's content, only Zhu Shiyao would be in pain, and Wang Lu would be in charge of being fast. However, the story of the low-level King Pill to the peak level involved too many secrets, so Wang Lu really didn't want to say more. And when the others realized this, they no longer asked. It was just that Lady Boss Fengling seemed to have noticed something. Her suspicious eyes constantly moved back and forth between the master and disciple of non-phase. Just when Fengling was about to open her mouth, Wang Wu interrupted her, clapped her hands and began to drive them away. Okay, next I'm going to capture Ask the Heavens. The scene is too big and the level is too high. If there's nothing else, you guys can leave early. As a result, Fengling naturally jumped 3 feet high. What the hell? You want us to come and go at your beck and call? Are you ordering us around like dogs? Before she could finish her words, she turned around and saw Bai Shishuan's awkward face. She didn't know whether to open her mouth or not. Fengling's anger immediately subsided. Sorry, little Bai, I'm not targeting you. Once Fengling's anger subsided, Wang Wu would no longer be her opponent. Thus, the order was quickly carried out. Zhu Shiyao didn't care. In the past few days, she had fought to her heart's content and had long been satisfied. Lu Li had always been obedient, and a box of snacks was enough for her to pledge her life to repay. Bai Shixian didn't have any particular intention to come. It was the sect elder who fancied her King Pill stage and immortal beast body, so he asked her to come and help. Now that she was no longer needed, she also happily left. Catgirl Ling Yan didn't have any leeway to speak. Although Yu Xinyao was somewhat reluctant, since the 5th elder had spoken, what else could she do? In fact, their task was indeed over. In the past few days, under the command of Wang Wu, they had repeatedly attacked and defeated opponents whose stage was far higher than theirs, and obtained quite a generous reward. Those open heaven and harmonious heaven were not easy to deal with. Although in theory, they should be determined to serve the heaven wholeheartedly, and had no desire for external things. In fact, each of them was very wealthy. And after being dealt with by Wang Wu's telepathic finger, they were willing to spend all their wealth to enrich the mustard seed bag of the Lingjian school people. This harvesting method was crude and direct, but the efficiency was surprisingly high. For example, the several Yin and Yang schoolgirls worked hard to do the task under Li Yan. Although it was safe and simple at most, they could get a few pieces of Li Yan's equipment, which was not that valuable, of course, for a group of Shudan and Foundation establishment little girls. A piece of King Pill level local tycoon's equipment could be regarded as a good harvest. With the experiential learning and harvest, the following Ask the Heaven ceremony really had little to do with them. Not to mention anything else, if they personally went to the high-level assembly of the Temple of Heaven, and were surrounded by a group of Yuanying and deity stage cultivators to perform the Ask the Heaven ceremony. Once something went wrong, Wang Wu didn't have the confidence to protect everyone. After sending the group of people away, the two of them quickly set up the array in the stronghold, and when their magical power was almost restored, they went out to catch the people. With the cooperation of Moonless, they soon locked on the target, Ping Shiwang, who was honored in the Temple of Heaven as one sword from the west, the one who swept away the group of devils. Among the 7 Shintian level monks, this person had the least seniority, but she rose the fastest. Because of her unconventional approach, she also offended the most people. For the other Shintian level monks, this ceremony was an opportunity to compete for the highest position, but for this Ping Shiwang, it was a danger of being unable to protect herself. As far as Moonless knew, there were at least 2 Shintian level monks who wanted to mess with her, and there might even be 3. And no one wanted to protect her. 1 against 3, she was indeed in a very dangerous situation. Therefore, at this time, if someone took the initiative to extend an olive branch, even if she had doubts in her heart, she would not let it go. Not to mention that the master of Chaotian Palace was relatively strong among the harmonious heaven level, and it was difficult for Ping Shiwang to win over him. Her foundation was not enough, and the path to the upper level could not go through, so she could only rely on the power of the lower level to support her. And a powerful vassal king like Chaotian Palace was definitely a powerful card. Sure enough, after Moonless issued the invitation, Ping Shiwang hesitated for a moment before agreeing to meet in a manor outside Sky City. After receiving the address, Moonless clicked her tongue in amazement. I thought that the manor was a private property of the people, but unexpectedly, it was actually a spy set up by Ping Shiwang outside Sky City. There were still a lot of unexpected things. When Moonless arrived at the manor with Wang Wu and Wang Lu, Ping Shiwang had been waiting for a long time. Beside her, a woman with long and narrow eyes and sharp eyes stood quietly in the shadows, exuding a needle-like murderous aura. Moonless used her primordial spirit to introduce her to Wang Wu. Sister Wu, this is the first fierce general under Ping Shiwang. In the past, she was the vanguard of the demons and devils in Red Metropolis. Her strength is extremely fierce, at least. I am no match for her. I thought she had fallen out with Ping Shiwang, but I didn't expect them to be in the same group. This is troublesome. I thought that after she left, there would be no one around Ping Shiwang for the time being. If she was alone, we would have a chance to win, but now. It doesn't matter, leave Ping Shiwang to me. You two are responsible for holding off that bodyguard. Don't let her get in the way. But, there was no but. Wang Wu's move was clean and neat. She took a step forward and directly used her non-phase sword defense to suppress the whole audience. This move came so suddenly that even with Ping Shiwang's strength, she was still unable to react. Sitting on the chair, she was pressed down and caught off guard. However, her bodyguard reacted very quickly. As soon as she made her move, 3 dark lights went straight toward Wang Wu. Moonless clearly saw that these were hidden weapons quenched with ancient poison, which were very vicious. With Wang Wu's normal cultivation base, she didn't need to care about them, but now her focus was on a Shintian level nun, so she might not be able to divert her attention to deal with these hidden weapons. Therefore, in desperation, Moonless had to personally act as a meat shield, sacrificing her life source spiritual treasure to block the 3 hidden weapons. As a result, although the hidden weapons were blocked, the spiritual treasure was also damaged. Under the power backfire, her vision turned black on the spot. And when her vision turned black, the bodyguard had already launched her full strength. Her figure flashed and flashed to the side. Purely in terms of cultivation base, she was just a low-level deity stage, which was not much different from Moonless. Even if her actual combat ability was above her, in a fight, the outcome would not be decided in a short period of time. Therefore, she did not intend to fight with Moonless. As long as she could obstruct that woman in white and free Ping Shiwang, a full-strength Shintian was enough to decide the outcome. However, just as she was about to approach her opponent, another person appeared in front of her. The position and timing of this person's appearance were too good. Completely relying on prediction, he walked ahead of her on her path. She didn't have enough time to stop, so she didn't intend to change her direction again. The full-strength charge of a Taoist master of deity stage, even a mountain would collapse. A mere Peak King pill was tantamount to a mantis trying to stop a chariot. However, the next moment, a sword tip appeared in front of her. It turned out that the opponent had stretched out a long sword, as if waiting for her to hit it. This simple and unadorned long sword contained an extremely threatening aura, which made her heart constantly sound with warning signs. This was not something that could be forcefully collided with the body. After making an instant judgment, she waved her right hand outward, and her arm hit the sword from the side, wanting to swing it to the side. But the moment her arm and the long sword touched, she felt her mind suddenly sink, and the original battle plan unexpectedly collapsed in an instant, leaving only chaos in her mind. At the same time, Wang Lu promptly released his hand, took a step back, and looked at his opponent with a bewildered expression, holding her head with a smile. Skybreaker, as an ancient immortal sword, is incomparably sharp, but it also has a great side effect. How does the taste of this brain-dead aura feel? Chapter 573. After successfully taking down Ping Shiwang and her bodyguard, Ping Shiwang did not make any extra resistance. In fact, after seeing the mind of her trusted bodyguard being defeated by the Skybreaker, she sighed as if resigned to her fate. She took back the life source spiritual treasure that she had prepared to explode, glanced at Wang Wu, and completely gave up resistance. Then she lightly said, "You kill me." As a high-level member of the Temple of Heaven, her judgment allowed her to calmly deal with the situation in any situation. Although it seemed that she still had the power to fight, she was a peak deity stage expert, but the opponents were only at the level of 2 King Pill. In theory, she could defeat the opponent with one look and one breath. But excluding these prejudices, years of actual combat experience told her that these 2 King Pill were actually very powerful, especially the one in front of her. Although she was only in the realm of King Pill, her strength was at least at peak deity stage or above. Now that she had lost the upper hand, there was no need to continue to resist. Ping Shiwang's calmness reduced Wang Wu's trouble, but it also made this victory a lot less glamorous, because Ping Shiwang did not look like a defeated captive at all. Her aloof attitude, even if she was reduced to a prisoner, was not reduced in the slightest. "You kill me." Her tone was not so much a request as an order, and it could be seen that she was serious. Were it not for the doctrine of the Temple of Heaven strictly opposing suicide, she would have already committed suicide. "TSK, I actually met a strong woman." Wang Wu suddenly felt surprised. Most of the high-level members of the Temple of Heaven were politicians, and most of the politicians were two-faced opportunists. The performance of Ping Shiwang was very unexpected. "Oh, there is no need to think so highly of her. She is just the result of weighing the pros and cons." While speaking, Moonless figure quietly appeared. After sending a gentle smile to Wang Wu, she explained, because she saw the true identity of Sister Wu's friend, she decided to die in order to live. Wang Lu pointed to herself and said, "My true identity?" Moonless smiled and said, "A chaotic species, isn't it?" Wang Lu shook his head. After recognizing Wang Wu, he removed the effects of his illusion. Anyway, there would be few opportunities for him to show his face in public, so it didn't matter if he hid his male identity or not. He had forgotten that he might be treated as a chaotic species. In fact, since the establishment of Tavern Heaven on Earth, there had never been a man such a creature for thousands of years. Even if ordinary people saw Wang Lu, they would only think that he was a relatively special existence with a relatively special appearance. In fact, in the women's kingdom, there was no shortage of women who were big and round like men. However, Moonless had fought his way through the invasion of chaos, so he was too familiar with the chaos species. He recognized Wang Lu after seeing him a few times. However, it seemed that under the effect of the telepathic finger, she had already let go of her irreconcilable hatred towards the chaotic species. Although Ping Shiwang has no military achievements, the bodyguards under her command have repeatedly made great contributions in the war, and their understanding of chaotic species is above mine. Now that she has seen that you are a chaotic species, she only has a dead end. Wang Lu said. In order to prove his loyalty by dying? Yes, she is in a very bad situation now. She may be overthrown from her position at any time. If the news of her collusion with the chaotic species is exposed at this time, she will never be able to rise again. As long as she doesn't die today, regardless of whether she actually submits or not, she will be labeled as colluding with the chaotic species. She will not be able to clear her name. Moonless said with a smile, and for people like her, if her political life is over, it is better to die. At least after her death, no one can deny everything she has done. The value of this kind of person has been completely tied to political life and is incurable. Wang Lu said. It sounds like you are very disapproving of political life? Of course. Moonless admitted without hesitation, in my opinion, this kind of person is very ridiculous. They are simply neglecting the essentials. Whether it is Shintian or Chengtian, even if they become the supreme number one person, what can they do? Under the watchful eyes of the public, every word and action must be cautious and not make mistakes. Their lives are not as good as mine. A vassal king with no political future. I can build moon capital on top of the palace of heaven, who would dare? Even if the standard of the residence is a little big, I will be scolded. I can raise 100 harem in moon capital, and when they want to play with a woman they have to be sneaky. I don't know what they are pursuing. Wang Wu said, when you reach Shentian's rank, isn't there a blessing from the heaven, and your strength will be higher than before? For example, look at this Ping Shiwang. Her aptitude is actually not as good as yours, but her strength is above yours. What's the point of becoming strong by relying on external forces? Cultivators cultivate themselves. And so what if she is Ping Shiwang? If she really fights with me on the battlefield, I'm afraid she is not my opponent. Moreover, in my opinion, the stronger the external force, the greater the restriction. After the establishment of the Temple of Heaven, I have never heard of anyone who could transcend the tribulation and ascend. All the previous Chengtian are no exception. Wang Lu looked at Moonless with great interest. I can't see that you have quite a lot of ideas. I don't know if you have these ideas from the beginning, or after being pressed to death in the palace of heaven and unable to advance even an inch. Humph. On the other side, Wang Wu listened to Moonless' analysis, but she could not help but fall into contemplation. After thinking for a moment, she said, things may be a little troublesome. What? Telepathic finger is mostly ineffective against Ping Shiwang. Wang Wu explained. Telepathic finger is essentially a primordial spirit skill that targets the weakness of other people's heart. The social structure of this heavenly earth is distorted by external forces, so most of the creatures have congenital defects, but Ping Shiwang, her obsession is too strong, enough to overwhelm all the defects. Take Moonless as an example. Don't look at her building a harem in Moon Capital, living a life of debauchery. In fact, deep in her heart, she has always longed for true love. Her lover died on the battlefield. If I target this point, it will be easy to capture her primordial spirit. As for the others, it is even simpler. Deep in the heart of most girls, they do not recognize same-sex love, which is distorted by the strong pressure of the social environment. As long as I trace it back to the source, I can disintegrate their heart defense. But Ping Shiwang is now completely immersed in political obsession. To exaggerate a bit, her primordial spirit structure is different from that of ordinary people. Damn, so cool? Wang Lu immediately turned his head and carefully observed Ping Shiwang. She looked like a graceful and luxurious woman, but her aura seemed a bit strong. He could not see that her primordial spirit was actually abnormal. Are the 7 Shenshins of the Temple of Heaven like this? It shouldn't be. Her situation is not the same as the others. Even if the others did not take advantage of the succession ceremony, they will not suffer a loss. Only she will not advance or retreat, and once she retreats, she may fall into a bottomless abyss. The level of pressure is completely not on the same level as the others. In short, your telepathic finger is ineffective, so how are you going to deal with this mess now? Wang Wu said, the trouble is here. During this time we have turned the heavenly earth upside down, but we did not attract any attention. We relied on the telepathic finger to take care of the aftermath perfectly. But now? Wang Lu thought for a moment and said, I have an idea. If you have no other way, you might as well let me try. What are you going to try? Use your superweapon to correct Ping Shi Wang's primordial spirit, and let her recall the happiness of a woman? If my superweapon is really that effective, I will first find a way to correct your 3 views. Hehe. I'm looking forward to it. Wang Lu frowned. He always felt that his threat just now failed and was instead taken advantage of by this infatuated girl. However, regardless of that, Birdman, dealing with the problem of Ping Shi Wang was the top priority. So he walked over to Ping Shi Wang, and after a moment of silence he asked, just now I heard people say that your primordial spirit structure is already abnormal, and your 3 views are different from ordinary people, so presumably you will not care about personal honor and disgrace and gains and losses. So I will speak frankly, I believe you can still listen to me. Seeing that Ping Shi Wang completely ignored his existence, Wang Lu smiled and threw out the big news. I have a way to make you an immortal hero in the heavenly mountain world. Although a martyr-like hero, you will die, but your prestige will far surpass all competitors, and even surpass the Supreme Chengtian. The idea you insist on, whether others agree or not, will be implemented. The territory you rule will become a benchmark in the heavenly earth, and will be imitated by others. Ping Shi Wang opened her eyes. The scene described by Wang Lu had a great attraction to her. Although she did not want to die, death was actually the best result for her now. And if she could become a hero after death, that would be the best. However, was that possible? Of course it's possible, I'm not joking. In fact, it's not difficult to achieve the goal. Wang Lu paused and asked, you are a senior member of the Temple of Heaven, so you should have heard of Ask the Heaven. Ping Shi Wang was stunned. You want to use me to contact the heaven? Yes, the Ask the Heaven ritual requires the sacrifice of monks above the Shentian level, and it's a matter of great importance. The Temple of Heaven has only had a few examples for thousands of years, but you can use this opportunity to become a hero that has not appeared in thousands of years. Facing the coercion and temptation of the chaotic species, you resolutely sacrifice yourself to trigger the heaven's punishment and resolve the crisis of the heavenly earth. But you may also become a laughing stock. Unable to rely on your own strength to fight against the chaos, you must involve the heaven, which is the embodiment of incompetence. What's more, letting you, a group of chaotic hybrids, pollute the heaven is a sin that can't be redeemed even if you die 100 times. You're quite smart, but unfortunately you don't know enough. In fact, we have seen the heaven not long ago. Seen the heaven? Impossible. You, a group of chaotic species. Wang Lu said, why is it impossible? Is it because the heaven told you? Although you are called the Temple of Heaven, in fact, how many people have really seen the heaven? You're just quibbling. Empty words are just quibbling, what about this? Wang Lu said and slightly released a trace of breath, which suddenly made Ping Shi Wang's complexion change dramatically. It was a trace of life energy that he accidentally collected when he was recognized by the heaven for the issue of protecting the big and the small. It is indeed the pure breath of the heaven's blessing, but why? Wang Lu secretly sighed in pity. If she was replaced with a more devout believer, when she sensed this breath, she would not need to ask why, she would directly kneel down and kowtow. Unfortunately, Ping Shi Wang's faith was not pious at all. She was only pious in her belief in politics. You don't need to know why, but you should at least know that if I can get this thing, at least I will not be the enemy of the heaven. According to the doctrine, evil people cannot preserve the blessing of the heaven. Indeed. Ping Shi Wang gently nodded her head and began to quickly weigh in her heart. She could not accept all of Wang Lu's words, and there were many contradictions that were difficult to explain. For example, the chaotic species should be the enemy of life and death, so why did they get the blessing of the heaven? For example, since he got the blessing, then he should be the messenger of the heaven, so why did he need to rely on his own strength to communicate with the heaven? This completely didn't make sense. At the same time, Wang Lu also quickly launched his inspiration to conceive the answer. The problem that made Ping Shihuang sink into contemplation, of course, he was also aware of it. After all, it was just nonsense, and there must be some things that didn't make sense, but he was Wang Lu, a man who could make the impossible possible. What was this little dilemma? He had already thought of a theory that could convince the other party. So he put on an enigmatic smile, approached Ping Shihuang, and whispered, "In fact, with your intelligence, it is not difficult to guess the truth. We are the real spokesperson of the heaven. As for the temple, after thousands of years of corruption, it has long stood on the opposite side of the heaven. Now, it is just a group of villains who steal the authority. Otherwise, why did the heaven almost never show up for thousands of years? The heaven has long been disappointed with everything in this world. Look at what the temple is like now. The ascetic monks are keen on the golden patch. A tyrannical person like Moonless can become a vassal king, and the high-level officials of the temple are full of opportunistic politicians. Tell me, such a temple, what qualifications does it have to be recognized by the heaven?" Ping Shihuang's brows locked tighter and tighter, completely lost in thought. But now there is an earth-shaking opportunity in front of you. Sacrifice yourself, receive the true will of the heaven, and you will become an unprecedented hero. It is impossible for the temple of heaven to be abolished. Of course it will not be abolished. A bridge between the heaven and the mortals is necessary. The problem is that the structure and attributes of this bridge may not necessarily be preserved in its original appearance. Isn't it? Wang Lu's voice became more and more bewitching. Think about it, even if we did not appear this time, how long can you continue to move forward in the temple system? Do you really think you have a chance to get the throne of heaven? Your idea has long been sentenced to death under this system, and you can only struggle at death's door. But if the heaven shows itself, who would dare to openly oppose you? At that time, who can shake your position? For you, this is simply a gamble with no capital but great profits. Tell me, what reason do you have to refuse? Then there was a long silence. After the silence, Ping Shihuang took a deep breath. Good, I will gamble this once. As soon as her voice fell, Wang Lu took the lead to applaud, but the applause was slightly sparse. Looking back, Wang Wu and Moonless looked at him with incredulous eyes. Wang Wu said through primordial spirit, "Senior brother, you're the best." Chapter 574. Without further ado, the Ask the Heaven ritual began to be prepared as soon as possible. Communicating with heaven with a mortal body was, in theory, the last choice of the Temple of Heaven. Carrying out the Ask the Heaven ritual meant that the power of mortals alone could not solve the problem, which was a manifestation of their own incompetence. At the same time, the ritual was as difficult as ascending to the sky. According to the Temple of Heaven, the preparation work should last for at least half a year, and the various rare materials needed were countless. However, this was simply a false proposition. If the situation was so urgent that the Temple of Heaven could not deal with it in any way, how could it take half a year to prepare for the ritual? In fact, the whole ritual only needs the self-sacrifice of one Shintian level nun or above. The arrangement of those arrays has no practical significance. They just artificially increase the cost of communicating with heaven to prevent others from communicating with heaven at will. In the basement of the manor, Wang Lu read the scriptures of the Temple of Heaven on the spot and made a judgment with certainty. Anyone could see the perfunctory nature of this, but Ping Shihuang seriously nodded her head and said, "It is true. When I first joined the Temple of Heaven, I also studied the knowledge in the ancient books. The Ask the Heaven ritual has been revised several times in the past 100 years, and each time it became more cumbersome and expensive. At first, I only thought that the belief of the Temple of Heaven was more and more reverent and devout, and more solemn toward heaven. Now, it seems that it is really necessary to artificially block the contact between heaven and the mortal world. Humph, this time, even if I have to sacrifice myself, I must receive the real will of heaven." Wang Lu smiled and did not speak. The so-called Temple of Heaven's deception was purely the result of his impromptu performance. He believed that with Ping Shihuang's vision, she would not be unable to see it. However, at this time she seemed to be convinced and put on the posture of a martyr. Of course, her belief in heaven was far from being as devout as martyrdom. It was nothing more than an act. However, right now there were only her confidants Wang Wu and Wang Lu in the manor. Who was this play for? It was really the instinct of political figures to act. However, it did not matter whether the play was good or not. As long as she could play her role, that was enough. Late that night, after a hard work, Ping Shiwang said with a sweaty face, "All the preparations for the ceremony have been completed." At this point, Ping Shiwang, through her own power in just half a day, completed the preparation ceremony recorded in the scripture, which required the joint efforts of hundreds of cultivators above the king pill level to complete for more than half a year. But ironically, the content of her effort was to adjust her immortal heart, making it truly a bit pious, so that she could smoothly move the heaven through self-sacrifice. With her strength at the pinnacle of the soul formation stage, she had to work hard for half a day to make herself somewhat devout. This was indeed quite ironic. After Ping Shiwang finished her preparations, Wang Wu and Wang Lu simply stayed in her manor. Because the succession ceremony was tomorrow, they decided to disguise themselves as Ping Shiwang's attendants and directly enter the venue. The second half of the night in the manor was long and dreary. Apart from Ping Shiwang, who occasionally explained to the two the matters they should pay attention to before entering the venue, no one present was willing to open their mouths to talk nonsense. Even though the two sides had formed a close cooperative relationship, there was no trust or affection between them, so the awkward atmosphere lasted until dawn. "Alright, let's get moving." Following Ping Shiwang's words, the group officially set off. In the process of entering Sky City from the manor outside the city, there were some twists and turns, because in theory, the high-level monks should have gathered in the city the day before the succession ceremony. Ping Shiwang spending the night in her private manor outside the city was easy to cause unnecessary trouble in public opinion. And when the group entered the ceremony venue, sure enough, they also encountered difficulties. The gatekeeper actually stopped Ping Shiwang on the grounds that the entry time had passed. This was of course a joke. Although the theoretically stipulated entry time had indeed passed, the protagonists of the succession ceremony were the 7 Shenshens. But now the Shenshens were stopped outside the venue. If this was not a joke, then what was? What's more, everyone knew that the so-called rules of the Temple of Heaven would never be applied to high-level monks. Even Moonless, a harmonious heaven-level monk, could unscrupulously open a harem in Moon Capital, let alone a Shantian who was late? Therefore, when Ping Shiwang saw this scene, her face sank. It seemed that some people really intended to fight to the death in this ceremony. They did not intend to give her a little room to turn around, and even use this kind of trick. Were they looking forward to her reaction? Were they looking forward to her becoming furious because of this offense, making a disgraceful move, and opening the curtain for the upcoming failure? Ping Shiwang thought so, and the corner of her mouth evoked a smile. A group of idiots who don't know that death is coming. In the face of the gatekeeper's difficulties, she had only one way to deal with it. Get lost. As a result, the peak Yuanying stage gatekeeper flew out upside down, rolling all the way along the pale blue carpet at the entrance of the venue, and the blood spurting from his mouth stained the carpet into a mess. The venue was completely silent. The thousands of monks gathered at the ceremony were still whispering to each other, seizing the last bit of time before the official start of the ceremony to communicate, but at this time, they were all speechless as they stared at the entrance, waiting for the appearance of an uninvited guest. Ping Shiwang, facing the eyes of the crowd, strode forward. Every step she took seemed to be sonorous and powerful, firmly catching everyone's attention. On the high platform of the ceremony, several Shenshens looked gloomy. In their view, this opponent, who was doomed to lose her reputation, seemed to have chosen the path of a life and death struggle. Every step she took on the pale blue carpet was smashing the hidden rules of the Temple of Heaven that had been passed down for thousands of years. Since the establishment of the Temple of Heaven, there had never been someone who dared to break into the venue in such a violent manner. Ping Shiwang was simply a pioneer. At this time, the Supreme Chengtian, who originally intended to remain neutral, could not sit still. This was the last grand ceremony of heaven that she would preside over in her career. She originally intended to use a smooth and even mediocre ceremony as a farewell to the supreme throne, but now it seemed impossible. As the person with the highest cultivation base in the venue, when she stood up, the thousands of people in the venue felt suffocated. The pressure of the supreme level and the aura of Changqian's throne superimposed. For a moment, it was as if the heaven had descended, making these believers of the heaven silent like cicadas in winter. However, Ping Shiwang turned a blind eye to it, and her pace became more stable. Behind her, the loyal bodyguard could not help but raise her head. This was because her master was already walking on a path of death. Every step she took was burning her own self, like a sacrifice to receive the will of the heavens. After a few steps, she had completely become an incomparably devout believer. Her immortal heart was so clear that it was almost transparent, and a huge amount of immortal spirit energy was overflowing from it. Thousands of people were dumbfounded, the 6 Shenshens on the high platform were dumbfounded, and even the Supreme Changtian was also dumbfounded. In history, only the saint closest to the heaven could have such a majestic and pure immortal spirit energy, and such a saint had not appeared in the world for nearly 1,000 years. Could it be that this Shintian Ping Shiwang, who was judged by many people to be eliminated in advance, was actually a deeply hidden saint of the heaven? The huge contrast caused everyone to be stunned. Only the calmest paragon Chengtian reacted immediately. She's sacrificing herself. She wants to ask the heaven. Quickly stop her. Don't let her blaspheme the heaven. The supreme nun of the temple of heaven roared madly. In her opinion, this was the crazy struggle of Ping Shiwang before her death. In order to seek a glimmer of life, she did not hesitate to report the mortal matters to the heaven, which was a great blasphemy. Once the will of the heaven really came, it would be a disaster for the entire temple of heaven and even the heavenly earth. However, her reaction was still a bit slow, because the first step Ping Shiwang took into the venue, she had already completed her self-sacrifice and got in touch with the heaven. That clear and pure immortal spirit energy was not her own, but the blessing of the heaven. The heaven had begun to descend. Under the pressure of the heaven, the supreme nun of the temple of heaven could not withstand it. After a roar, she helplessly knelt on the ground. She was a dignified supreme, but at this time, she was as weak as an ordinary woman without any cultivation base. It was not that the power of the heaven was too strong, but that she, as the supreme nun, had already been closely integrated with the heaven, willing to be its vassal, and simply unable to resist the will of the heaven. At the same time, Ping Shiwang consciously climbed to a new peak in her life. The first time she came into contact with the will of the heaven, she knew that she had won the bet. Because the Great Will did not reject her, let alone deny her. She asked herself and found that she was not a truly qualified believer. Rashly contacting the heaven would only cause her to suffer the wrath of the heaven. Then the acquiescence of the heaven at this time undoubtedly meant that the speculation of the chaotic species was likely to be correct. Because this time she carried a great mission to ask the heaven, so a little sin was not worth mentioning. Not only that, once the heaven completely descended, she, as the guide, would become the great prophet that the temple of heaven would need to worship for the next thousands of years. At that time she would truly be immortal. With overflowing excitement, Ping Shiwang finally walked to the high platform that symbolized the supreme status of the temple of heaven. Whether it was Shuntian or Changtian, they could not stop her footsteps. The only pity was that when she reached this step, she was about to burn out. However, at this time, boom! A muffled thunderous sound broke the holy atmosphere in the venue and squeezed in at an inopportune time. At the same time, a strong shock wave swept the venue, shaking the earth and the mountains. In the distance, a purple pillar of fire rose to the sky, tearing the earth and running all the way to the sky. People's eyes could not help but be attracted by it, only to see the purple pillar of fire, like a drop of ink on a white paper, quickly spread out, and in a flash half of the clear sky was obscured. This is. On the high platform, Changtian trembled all over and murmured incredulously, "Chaotic invasion?" You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.